It'll just be 1 second.
Okay.
And you're all set.
Thank you. We're now live with the Joint Standing Committee, excuse me, on Energy, Utilities, and Technology. I am State Senator Mark Lawrence. I am the Senate Chair of the committee. Joining me in a few minutes will be Representative Berry, who is the House Chair. And I'll check and see if he's joined. There he is. So we're going to have introductions in a moment of committee members. But the purpose of today's meeting is not to conduct any official business other than to receive reports from agencies. This is not a public hearing. This is not a work session. We are essentially getting together as a committee to hear the reports of agencies that are either supposed to or have been asked to report back to us by committee members. So I'll go around and ask committee members to introduce themselves. And I'll start off first with Representative Berry.
Good morning, everyone. Looking forward to today's reports. I'm Seth Berry, the House Chair, and I proudly represent House District 55, which is Bowdoin-Bodenham, most of Richmond, and beautiful Swan Island on the Kennebec.
Great. I'll go next to Representative Chris Kessler.
Good morning. I'm Chris Kessler, representing part of South Portland and a little smidgen of Cape Elizabeth.
Next to the Republican lead on the committee, Representative Nate Wadsworth.
Good Thursday morning, everybody. I am Nate Wadsworth, and I represent House District 70, Hiram, Porter, Brownfield, Freiburg, and Lovell.
Great. I'll go next to Representative Paige Ziegler.
Good morning. I'm Representative Paige Ziegler from Waldo County, the District 96, the 7 towns of Belmont, Liberty, Lincolnville, Montville, Morrow, Palermo, and Sioux.
Next to Representative Steve Foster.
Good morning. I am Steve Foster, representing District 104, including the towns of Dexter, Garland, Exeter, Stetson, and Charleston. And here at my place this morning, it's a 90-degree differential between inside and outside air temperature, where you hit minus 19.3, and it's a lot colder at some of my neighbors' houses.
Wow. Thank you. Representative Nicole Grahowski.
Good morning, everyone. Nicole Grahowski. I represent House District 132, which is Ellsworth and Trenton. And I think it's chilly here, but I can't compete with that, Rep. Foster.
And next, Representative Scott Cuddy.
Good morning, I'm Scott Cuddy. I represent House District 98, which is Winterport, Frankfort, Searsport, and Swanville. I live in Winterport, and we have already risen all the way to -9. So I'm feeling pretty good about that.
Thank you. And I believe that's it for the committee. So suffice it to say, committee members are using a lot of energy this morning to heat their homes, as are our constituents. We're going to hear 2 reports this morning, and I just kind of wanted to go over the format. This is not a public hearing. There'll be an opportunity for the presenters to present their report. I'm going to ask that we conserve questions towards the end, and then go over our questions at the end of the report. I don't think they're going to be long presentations. If there's something critical you need to get answered right at that point, I'll recognize you to ask a question, but general questions, I'm going to ask you to save all to the end. This is not a public hearing, so this is not an opportunity for the public to question the people presenting the reports. I would encourage members of the public listening in, if they have comments on the report or questions about the report that they want to get to the committee, to submit it to the committee. And we can receive that. It'll be shared among committee members. It'll be shared information we get. And it allows us to, as we evaluate these reports down the road, to have information and perhaps critical information about these reports. We're going to have 2 presentations today. So I'd ask you, first of all, to bring over the first presenter, if you could. is that Andrew Landry and William Hargood, who's going to be presenting first. So William Hargood is our new, Harwood is our new public advocate in the state of Maine. His first chance to address the committee after being confirmed yesterday by the Senate. So I want to welcome you here, Bill. And I'll leave it up to you how you want to present your report. But go ahead. One of the things we ask of people is that you tell us the title of the report, and this is more for the general public, so we know, and then give them a description on where they can find that report online in case they want to follow along on the report as you're presenting it.
Thank you so much, Senator and members of the committee. Thank you for your support of my nomination. It's very much appreciated. I am here this morning to listen and learn. The Deputy Director, Mr. Andrew Landry, will present the report, and I will be listening carefully to his report as I've only been in this new job. I think I'm up to about 15 or 20 hours. So I'm still in a very much a learning mode, but I will turn it over to Drew Landry to present the report this morning.
Great. Drew, if you could just tell committee members what report you'll be presenting. And I should have said at the start, this broadcast is being live streamed over the internet. It's also being recorded in committee members. So if you could identify the report you're going to be presenting and then identify where it could be found online.
Good morning, Chair Barry, Chair Lawrence, members of the committee. I'm Andrew Landry. I'm the Deputy Public Advocate for the state of Maine. The report that I am presenting today is the Office of the Public Advocate annual report for the period July 1st, 2020 to June 30th, 2021. Folks can find it on the Maine Public Advocate website, which is part of the state of Maine greater website. And if you just Google Maine OPA annual report, it'll come to the page, and the most recent one is at the very top. Is that sufficient? Great.
I think that's fine. We'll let you by with that, Drew, right now. I do like people actually to give us the drop downs because not everybody's sophisticated on the internet, and give us your website and to give what drop downs you choose.
Okay, so it's the website is www.maine.gov/MEOPA, Maine OPA, and from the homepage, you'll go to About Us, and then in the drop down from that is Annual Reports, and the top one is the 2021 annual report. So
great, that's very sufficient. So thank you for doing that, and you
no
can
problem.
Go ahead and present your report.
Thanks. Again, good morning. I'm Andrew Landry, Deputy Public Advocate. Just as a background, we generally summarize our mission in the annual report. The OPA is an independent agency. The Public Advocate is appointed by the governor, confirmed by the legislature, but has a fixed term and is not subject to the discretionary dismissal by the governor, except at the end of the term. We're charged with representing the interest of Maine utility customers and any forum in which their interest is affected effectively, which includes the Maine Public Utilities Commission, federal agencies, courts, the Maine legislature, regional stakeholder groups, and whatever states, which would include, for instance, the New England Power Pool Participants Committee, as well as on those stakeholder committees that might be designated by the legislature, the governor, or which we believe we can provide value to on our own initiative. We also provide services to support utility customers, which include a variety of services for customers who are bringing complaints against utilities. We provide litigation advice. We do not advise them legally. We do not represent individual consumers or groups of 10 people who file 10-person complaints against the PUC, but we do assist them in navigating what can be a relatively complex administrative process, how to file a complaint, what information has to be included in the filing, how to do it electronically, advising them with respect to how to conduct discovery, participate in discovery, file comments, these sorts of things. We also respond to consumer calls and complaints. Most recently, we've been receiving probably 24 calls a day regarding competitive energy supply. And we are doing our best to advise customers about what their options are. We have a page on our website that lets people know what the most recent offerings that have been publicly provided by competitive suppliers are offering, and helping people try to respond to the change in competitive supply prices that we've experienced today. This morning on ISO New England, with this cold weather, the wholesale price of electricity in New England this hour is 17 cents a kilowatt hour. And so obviously has translated into high standard offer rates that are affecting everyone in Maine. We also, but we frequently get complaints from customers who have specific concerns with the utilities. Might be a billing mistake. If there's sometimes we'll refer them to the Consumer Assistance Division if it's a complaint that can be brought against the utility through their processes. But often the Consumer Assistance Division refers customers to us. We can assist them in interfacing with appropriate folks at utilities. Sometimes we can cut through some of the red tape to get to senior supervisors and managers at the utilities to get their specific concerns addressed more quickly. As I think we show on page 34 of the report, about half of these calls that we get annually relate to electricity. This year it might be higher because of the competitive supply issue. About a quarter of the calls we get relate to internet, which is not something that we're charged with representing customers specifically with respect to, but which we do undertake to assist customers with to the best extent that we can. We can, and frequently when we get calls about things, whether it's cell phones, internet, these sorts of things, we will direct, we can at least advise customers about, if we're not the agency that can assist them, we can direct them to folks who can. So we serve as a little bit of a clearinghouse that way. And we have this year been getting a large number of calls regarding community solar. It's very confusing for people how to assess whether whether that the service is something that's appropriate for them, and mostly giving them some questions to ask to make sure that they are getting the best deal that they can, if that's something they're considering. And the final thing we do, which is sort of related to the other, but is a general consumer education. We primarily do this through our website, but we also, I think, pre-COVID and hopefully post-COVID, we try to engage the public outside of in person when there's appropriate opportunities. I know we've had people attend, events where there's an opportunity to perhaps have a table and answer questions for people who come up, but with COVID, that hasn't been possible in the last year. The other function which you gave to us 3 years ago now is the function of engaging a non-wires alternative coordinator for the state of Maine. We engaged about 2 years ago a consulting firm called DNV, what used to be DNV Global, but they lost Global somewhere along the line. I believe they're also doing some work for the Governor's Energy Office on offshore wind and perhaps some for Efficiency Maine Trust as well. But they've assisted us in analyzing transmission projects Maybe I'll just jump in since I'm talking about that right now and talk about what our experience has been with NWAs, which is addressed in the report. So far, we've done analyses of two significant transmission projects as an NWA coordinator, or we've advised. Basically, we provide the legal advice, and DNV provides the technical advice. But one project in the Thompson, Maine area, where we have reached a settlement with CMP to implement the first non-wires alternative project in Maine under the statute. That's waiting PUC approval. And we've also been analyzing a project in the Mid-Coast area that's still underway. There's an ongoing PUC proceeding with respect to that. One of the things I will talk about is more generally, which is what we've learned along the way. We spent a lot of time analyzing these projects, and a lot of it's been an educational experience, probably not providing sufficient value for the individual projects, but really understanding how the utility planning processes work and why NWA analysis has been done on an insufficient basis in the past. And we found a few things. Number one, we've seen utilities have not done an adequate job coordinating their distribution planning with their transmission planning. They've tended to silo those two exercises, and as a result, they may not be right sizing the facilities for either distribution or transmission. They may oversize one or the other based on the fact that they're not, the distribution planners don't know what's going on the transmission side and vice versa. The second is, at least with respect to one utility, a failure to populate the planning models that they use for transmission distribution planning purposes with adequate data, so that we don't see sufficient. It's difficult for a third party to come in and analyze the planning decisions they've made because they don't have their planning models themselves they haven't been populated, which suggests they're not really using them, which suggests that there's a little bit an excessive reliance on what I know there's heavy technical analysis, but what feels like a back of the envelope analysis of how to size transmission system, and it becomes a little bit of a difficult exercise to serve as a third party evaluator of it when you can't replicate their results, and there's no clear planning standard that you're trying to replicate with a non-wires alternative. And the third thing I'll say is that we've seen a reluctance on the part of the utilities to actually operate their system. In other words, they want transmission and distribution solutions which are passive, and which I understand it's easier to operate, but it may entail having solutions that are more capitally intensive than they need to be. I think we've all heard the term smart grid. That's been floating around for 10 years now, probably, maybe more. But this idea that we would, be able to operate the transmission system in a way that it improves its efficiency and thereby reduces the capital requirements. These are going to be very important things as we look at grid modernization to support electrification, such as the growth of electric vehicles and heat pumps. And it's also going to be extremely important as we look at trying to develop a more holistic grid planning process for distributed energy resources. For instance, one of the key benefits of distributed energy resources, which are among the tools in the toolbox for non-wires alternatives, is to place those on circuits where they provide value to the circuit and avoid the need for transmission or distribution upgrade, as opposed to other circuits where the circuit's robust, has no need for distributed energy resources, and the placement of a DER on one of those circuits, while it may provide values of renewable energy resource and climate change and all that, is providing no particular benefit to the circuit, and therefore no distribution or transmission benefits, which should be justified for certainly for any resource being charged on net energy billing basis. I think that's more than enough about NWAs for now. So talk about some of the major proceedings that we've been involved in this year. The one that jumps out at me as I look at the report is the CMP annual compliance filing. Central Maine Power annually files a proceeding in which it has its revenue decoupling mechanism, but also reconciles a number of costs which it's entitled to reconcile under some prior orders that the PUC has allowed. And they also simultaneously, or they implement these changes simultaneously with their transmission rates, which is FERC jurisdictional, but it results in one big rate change in around July every year. And last year, during the report period here, the CMP had filed for a $70 million increase in its transmission rates, which represented a 25% increase in overall rates for CMP customers, which was an extremely large increase. And there were some reasons for that, one of which is the way FERC sets the rates, where there was in the prior period, there had been a flowback of over-recovered dollars because the rates over-collected in a prior year, and they were giving money back to customers. And then at the same time, during the year that this year's rates were going to be based on, there was an under-recovery. So there was a huge swing from having a return of an over-recovery to having to collect an under-recovery all in one swoop. Now we're active at FERC in challenging CMP's transmission rate increase, but we're very hopeful we're going to get a reduction of the $70 million, but it's not going to be by $70 million. We might be able to knock 10% of that off or something like that. And that's ongoing. We're pretty close to done, but we'll see how that ends up. But in order to offset that, step back. As part of the annual reconciliation mechanism the CP had, they were looking to recover a significant amount of storm costs that they had incurred the prior year, which was going to result, I think, in a $20 million increase on top of the $70 million increase, which seemed like quite a bit. So we had proposed to the PUC that they defer a large portion of the storm cost recovery to begin recovering in a future period. And the commission accepted a recommendation and reduced the annual reconciliation by increased by about $12 million. Now that's money that will have to be recovered in the future, but would have been $12 million on top of transmission rate increase, on top of the ultimate stranded cost increase. And we're hopeful that the transmission rates, because it reflects this recovery of a under recovery from a prior period, that simply if they've correctly projected their costs for this year, then there will be no that in fact there'll be a transmission rate decrease on the next go round that will balance out the increase for the storm costs, but we'll have to wait and see on that. That's our hope. We'll find out in a few months, I guess. But some of the other big items that we were involved in this past year, we were involved in 3 cases relating to competitive energy suppliers, all of whom were engaged in practices that were anti-competitive, predatory, variety of actions by those competitive energy suppliers. You probably recall that I think we had some legislation that arose out of one of the situations that Electricity Maine had a series of mostly related to door-to-door sales. And that case finally resolved last year with a $500,000 one-time penalty of Electricity Maine, which is the maximum allowed for a single series of related violations under Maine statute. We had argued for the commission to find that there were multiple series of violations, so they could increase the penalty, but the commission didn't accept our arguments. But they did accept our recommendation to ban Electricity Maine from engaging in door-to-door sales on a permanent basis. They can ask to come back sometime, but they are permanently banned from door-to-door sales. The others were a little less egregious, and they were for some of the smaller operators, but in their cases, they have multi-year bans on door-to-door sales. So because of their violations were also primarily related to door-to-door sales. I think we had also, in one case at least, we had banned them from doing telemarketing because there were some concerns about that as well. In the area of, hold on. There was the commission had opened an investigation last year as a result of the pandemic, where they had terminated utilities' rights to do disconnections during the pandemic, and we had argued to keep that in place so that it went through the winter period. I think there was some lack of clarity in terms of whether utilities were going to be allowed to disconnect during a short window between the end of the disconnection, the disconnection moratorium and the start of the winter period, when another moratorium would have went into effect. The PUC did clarify that and clarify their order that it is their intent to maintain the moratorium right until the date when the winter moratorium went into effect. So that was, I think, mostly a communication issue that we got the commission to be clear. I think customers were confused, and by the restart of the disconnection process, which for many people, we learned that the disconnection process, getting a disconnection notice can be a trigger for the eligibility for benefits under both federal programs. And so it's not necessarily bad to get a disconnection notice if you're entitled to get benefits that are triggered by it, as long as the utility follows its obligations to negotiate payment arrangements and these sorts of things, which that's something we deal with on our individual customer call basis. There were a few telephone companies, including Consolidated Communications, that were involved in reorganization proceedings this year. Now, typically, our interest under the statute now is to worry about customers of provider of last resort service. That's what the PUC regulates, but they're still subject to approval. The company seeks reorganization, even though provider of last resort service is probably a relatively small portion of their service or their revenues in the state. And what we've tried to do is get commitments from the utilities to, number one, to lock down their POLR rates. So although they're entitled under the provider of last resort statute to have annual increases, in the case of the utilities that came in for reorganizations, we got agreement that they would have no increases in rates for a period. We also got commitments to ensure that there would be best efforts made to provide discount rates for broadband service for customers of those services. And in both cases, the
Speaking of broadband, we seem to
We're
have,
running into a little bit of problem. Is everybody else having the problem hearing from Drew?
yes, he seems to have frozen.
So Drew, we have a little bit of problem. So why don't you see if you can solve it on your end? Bill, are you still there?
Yes, I am here, Senator.
And are you getting your connection fine?
I am fine, but I am not in the office this morning. I am working from remotely today, so.
Yeah.
So another,
Do you want to text Drew and see how he's doing and see what the issue is?
Will do.
While he's doing that, I do want to take a second to introduce our people who work for our committee. And I'm going to introduce first our analyst, Lindsay Laxon. I don't know if I caught you off guard, Lindsay, but if you could just show yourself on the screen.
Good morning.
Good morning, Lindsay. Lindsay is our legal analyst and technical analyst for the committee. Her role is to provide legal services and get us technical services on energy issues as we consider legislation and various other things. And then I'm going to put our committee clerk on the spot, and hopefully our committee clerk is fairly new, so I hope I don't butcher your last name, Jason, but if you could just show your face.
there he is.
And Jason, if you could just, it's Aldering, did I pronounce it right, or how do you pronounce your last name?
Allarding.
Allarding, okay.
That's correct. Yep.
So we'll do some practice sessions on that. I'll do some practice sessions with you to make sure I get it right. Jason's role is to, excuse me, is to service the committee on clerical matters, getting us the information we need, setting up these hearings, setting up these Zoom conferences and all different kinds of things. And the third person coming on our screen is Skeet. He is an often visitor to my end of the committee, and he likes to stick his nose in the middle of what we're doing occasionally, so I apologize for that. So Jason is the person, if you want to be heard at a public hearing or anything, or want to get involved, you would contact Jason, and he would walk you through the process of what you have to do. Bill, how are we doing on Drew?
Drew reports that he is doing everything possible to rejoin. He is trying to dial in now.
Okay.
But I'm happy to take questions, but obviously I did not have a role in participating in drafting and preparing that report. But if there are general areas of questions and concerns, I can do my best to respond, but more appropriately.
Why don't we give Bill, why don't we give Drew a minute to join back in, because he's the one really that can answer the technical questions at this point. And I guess I'm going to kind of take a little aside to just, and I always kind of approach these hearings of the EUT committee as if I was a member of the public, totally unsophisticated with the process, listening in and kind of how I would understand the process. So I'm going to ask Lindsay to share her screen and see if we can go to maine.gov and the Public Advocates webpage. And if you could just let me know when somebody joins the when Drew is back onto the committee, we can go back to him. But the Public Advocate serves a very important role in the Maine system of government. And the Public Advocate is essentially the legal counsel for the public in utility issues. Utility issues are very complicated. The average citizen, it's very hard to navigate them. So in rate setting and other things, the public advocate serves as the legal representative of the public to advocate on behalf of the public. This is the public advocate's website, and you can look at it. And Lindsay, why don't you go to the About Us screen and the drop down, and you'll see it describes briefly what the public advocate is. If you go back up and click the drop down on that screen again, it also provides contact information, but you see where it says annual reports. That's the report we're on today and we're considering. And the first report is the one we're considering. We're in now a time of heightened public awareness of utility issues, largely because transmission issues, billing issues, and rising rates. So there is a lot of public interest in what's going on in utilities. And the public advocate is one of the sources for the public to go to find information about utility rate setting and various issues that affect them. I see Drew is back on. Drew, have we got you back?
You do. Yeah, that's right. Ironically, just as I was talking about broadband, and it looks like we lost our broadband connection here in the office. So,
well, it gave me a time to do a little filler on what is the public advocate and how to get information from your office. So why don't you continue with your report?
Thanks. I had only a few more things to cover, honestly. Number one, well, we're talking about wanting to assist low-income customers in having access to discount rates for internet service. The federal government has helped a little bit with that, but we want to ensure that when the federal government is providing a subsidy, that the subsidy is off a rate that results in a price that's low enough for income-affected customers to be able to afford. And we did get concessions from the utilities involved in those proceedings to do that, where we're very hopeful that it's going to allow customers to get broadband, not just because it's available, but because it's something they can afford. The other two proceedings I want to talk about one in the gas industry, which is a Bangor gas reorganization. Similarly, well, there we didn't want cheap broadband, but we did want some concessions. One of the things we have from Bangor Gas is an agreement not to have a rate increase for 3 years. So that was something that we're fortunate enough to be able to negotiate with them and to implement some other public enhancements. And in all these merger proceedings, a couple of years back, we changed the merger standard in Maine for utility mergers from one where there was effectively no net harm to utilities to one where the transactions had to show net benefits to utility customers. And that's given us a substantially more negotiating leverage with the utilities in these merger proceedings. And we've been able to negotiate public benefits packages or customer benefits packages, as it were, that I believe are substantially better for customers. We're able to get better concessions out of the utilities when we engage, when these transactions come before us, and that's we do the grunt work in the proceedings, but really it's very much an outcome that's a result of the legislative changes that you guys were involved in a few years ago. And the final one I wanted to talk about has to do with the Maine Water Company rate case. Their Biddeford and Saco district in particular is installing a new water treatment facility, one that we're told is long overdue. But as a result of being long overdue, like a lot of water infrastructure, it's also represents a very large investment that's going to result in a very large rate increase, and to attempt to smooth the implementation of that rate increase, Maine Water came in and proposed a phase-in mechanism that would have customers start paying for the plant before it goes into service. Well, we were against starting ahead of time, but the commission overruled us on that. But what we were able to do in that case was to identify that Maine Water had improperly calculated the tax impacts related to receiving the revenue before the facility went into place, and as a result, we were able to save customers $600,000 or $700,000 in a water district that doesn't serve that many customers. That's a lot of money. So I did want to highlight that particular case. And with that, and with my internet service restored, I am happy to answer some questions.
Thank you, Bill. And those are very good examples of what the public advocate does. We're going to go to questions from the committee, and I'm going to be a little bit more liberal than I usually am on questioning. I'm just going to recognize committee members as they have questions. Raise your hand so I can see who wants to ask questions. And once somebody has the floor, feel free to do follow-up questions until you complete your questions. And then I will go on to another committee member. If I feel one committee member is perhaps monopolizing too much time, I'll give them a gentle nudge to allow somebody else to jump in. With that said, we'll start off with Representative Berry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Deputy Director Landry, for your service as acting director, and congratulations to our new public advocate, Mr. Harwood. We are obviously at a really critical stage with our dependence on utilities, and in particular electricity, and so your role, I think, becomes more and more important looking into the future. And we spoke about this to some extent during the confirmation hearing. And I think just to pick up a couple of threads from the presentation we just heard, I am interested in the matter of cost deferral. The storm restoration costs, which are borne by customers, were deferred for CMP and not for Versant. And I'm just wondering, can you speak about when it is appropriate in your view to defer storm costs or other costs, and when it is not, and also the impact on customers when costs are deferred? What additional carrying cost is borne by the customers for that? For example, a 1-year deferral.
I'll field that, unless Bill, you want to?
Nope, I'm happy to let you, and then if Representative Berry would like my thoughts, I'm happy to.
Great.
And if the committee members have a preference as to whether you hear from Mr. Landry or myself, by all means, we're both here. Just so indicate.
Great.
I think the big difference between Versant and CMP was that Versant was not proposing an increase in its transmission rates. So the need for the deferral was less acute. As your question supposes, when you defer, there is an additional cost you incur. You are paying the utility its carrying costs on those deferred amounts, and those carrying costs are going to have to be deferred from customers. So it's not a mechanism that I prefer to use, but it's one that occasionally is necessary to provide a little bit of a smoother transition in rates. And we did in the Versant case, we were able to litigate a reduction in the amount of storm costs that were allowed. So that was a benefit separately, but that's a separate issue. But if Versant had been looking at a significant transmission rate increase, we probably would have looked at the same, at least considered the same, pursuing the same option.
Great. So it sounds like there's no additional profit for the utility in a deferral, but the short-term interest rate is the carrying cost. Is that correct? So the cost of short-term debt.
Not always. I mean, occasionally it depends. Bill probably knows this better than I do. It depends on the amount and the nature of the deferral. A 1 year deferral, I don't remember what the PUC did in with respect to the $12 million. Honestly, it's too many cases. But occasionally with a very short term deferral, this is a 1 year deferral, you might be able to get away with a short term interest rate. But if you're deferring something over multiple years, you're going to it's going to be the full cost of capital of the utility.
Great. Mr. Harwood, do you want to add anything?
No, I think what Drew has said is right. If it's small amounts and short term, we sometimes convince the utilities and the commission to go with the short term debt rate, which is very favorable to ratepayers. But if it's large sums over a long period, the utilities are going to push hard, and the commission has respected that they will get their what we call their overall weighted average cost of capital, which is what it costs them to go into the market to borrow the money to defer the recovery.
If I may, well, seeing no objection from my co-chair, I'll continue with the line of questioning.
Yes, continue on, Representative Berry.
Thank you very much. I find this interesting. So the cost of capital is the weighted average cost of capital is especially applicable in cases where there's infrastructure investment, right? So investment in infrastructure is treated differently. That typically involves a return on equity, and 50% of the capital raised is typically equity. So if we're deferring operations and maintenance, O&M, which is not typically compensated with that equity profit, is it appropriate? Does the public advocate consider it appropriate in a typical case to roll that into a regulatory asset, which does involve the more expensive equity, and have that flow back to ratepayers in the future?
I'll jump in again and let Bill correct me if I'm wrong, but I mean, our position is you're making our argument that we make to the PUC all the time, which is that we ought to use the short-term cost of debt unless it's a particularly long deferral. But I'm just being honest with you. We don't win that argument all the time. So.
Got it. Okay. I have another question, but Senator Lawrence, if there's anyone else that wants to jump in, you can come back to me.
Okay, thank you, Representative Berry. Representative Foster?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think I have a simple question here for you. In regards to those energy providers that are out there, I know the PUC has been, the Office of the Public Advocate has been instrumental in kind of monitoring that situation. The committee has addressed some of the gouging, if you will, that took place, and some of the door-to-door sales tactics that took place over the last few years. But my question is, does your site, I can't find it, I haven't been able to, but do you offer consumers an opportunity to compare those providers with the standard offer? And I'll give you an example. I received a call the other day representing another organization, and from one of these providers touting their 6 cents kilowatt hour rate. However, when I pressed them for more information, I found that they can raise that rate after the first month up to 20% a month. My calculations show that at month 8 or 9, they would be well above the standard offer. So I'm wondering, do you have a place, or is that something we might provide to consumers where they can go get a comparison of all these approved providers in the state of Maine, so that, because I know in the past people have signed up not thinking to do that, or not knowing where to find that information, and they find after a few months they're well above what was the standard offer. Which so I'm just wondering, am I missing something, or is that something we might think about? Thank
Well,
you.
what we do have, and again, since most of the inquirers, in terms of volume number, are residential customers, we do have an electricity supply page on our website. So if you go to public app, maine.gov/MEOPA, hit the electricity tab, and under there's something called electricity supply. And there we have the current, most recent offers that have been provided to us by the major suppliers in the state for residential customers. And that's frequently where we direct people who call, see what their options are. Now, we do get calls from small commercial customers as well, with questions like yours. And we can help walk them through that. If they're having a variable price offered to them, what does that mean? But we don't do the calculations on our website. But your math is correct that they would have the opportunity to do that. I don't know, and I'm sure that does happen when there's a higher price environment. Sometimes there's they have to remain competitive. So one of the questions we encourage everybody to ask is, what's the early termination fee? If there's no early termination fee, the fact you've got a variable rate with increases is theoretically less damaging, because if they raise your rate too much, you can go to a different supplier. If you have an early termination fee and you've locked into a variable rate, I would encourage any customer not to, if they're taking a variable rate, to make sure they have no early termination fee, because the supplier is taking no long-term risk if they're offering a variable rate, where I understand that the potential need, at least, for a early termination fee if I'm locking a rate for 6 months or a year. I don't know if you find that helpful.
Well, yes, unfortunately, although that may have changed here recently, a lot of people just pay their bill. They don't necessarily look at it that closely. And what I found, and what I think your office has found, is a lot of people, once they're on the hook, when those rates go up, they don't really notice it from month to month.
No, it's a business model that's used in a lot of industries. So your streaming service subscriptions, they're counting on you never canceling, or your Planet Fitness gym membership. They're all counting on you never canceling, and that's one reason why they, remember years ago you'd get a $100 offer from MCI to switch your long distance service, because they're counting on you never switching.
Thank you.
Are you all set, Representative Foster?
Yes, I suppose at this time. Thanks.
No, that was a very good question, and we really appreciate it. Representative Kessler.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, everybody. This is kind of a broad question, and it's really more to get your opinions on, how we should move forward as a state. You had mentioned that a quarter of your calls have to do with cable and internet, I believe. Was that correct?
Internet, yes.
Internet.
Probably cable in there too, yeah.
Yeah, and so there is there's a conflict in federal and state law as to the regulation of these services, and I was wondering if you could just give us, like, briefly a 101 on the obstacles that we're facing as a state, and how you best feel that we should move forward in advocating for customers and having the best outcomes for customers of internet and cable.
I don't know if that's a broad question. As you know, the state does not regulate broadband service, and even the FCC really does not regulate broadband service. So there's a the regulation or the opportunity to intervene as the government has been primarily to provide funding mechanisms to encourage the development of facilities in locations. I think you've created the Maine Connectivity Authority. I would submit that they have. I was impressed by the presentation that was made by the chair when he preceded me at the last time I testified to the committee. That they have a pretty good vision about how to, if not go about it, how to go about figure out how to go about it. If that makes sense. The other issue, aside from availability, which I've already alluded to, is the issue of ensuring access by economically challenged people. So you have geographically challenged and economically challenged customers. I think the Maine Connectivity Authority will do a great job dealing with the issue of geographically challenged customers. But for economically challenged customers, if the federal subsidy is being reduced to a $35 discount, if the going rate is $70 or $80, a $35 discount still leaves folks with a $40 or $50 bill, which is a fairly significant number for somebody who's living on a fixed income. I don't know if the state is inclined to do anything to provide support over and above that, and beyond who qualifies for a federal subsidy. There may be economically challenged folks who don't qualify for a federal subsidy who still require some support to have service. So, internets and broadband are, have replaced, not replaced, they've joined the team of services that have become essential for modern life. And so figuring out how to ensure that everybody has access to it, both geographically and based on income requirements, is a very important challenge. I would, perhaps charge, they have a lot of things on their plate, but I don't know if that's Connect Maine or the Maine Connectivity Authority, that they're agencies who are well equipped to deal with that, and we're happy to work with them to address particularly the low income challenges that they're facing.
Representative Kessler, any follow-up?
I was wondering if Bill had any thing to add.
Yeah, thank you, Representative Kessler. This is an issue that's been debated by the academics for 20 years or so as to whether the internet service provider is the fifth public utility and after electricity, gas, telephone, and water. And so far, it hasn't been caught on as that additional type of utility that deserves the traditional public utility, in part because we got away from non-voice transmission. We said that if you're using the wires for voice transmission, you're going to be regulated as a utility. If you're not using it for voice, then you're not regulated as a utility. Whether that distinction really holds up. And the other distinction was, we don't regulate utilities if it's a non-essential service. So if you're using it to stream your most popular movie or your most popular TV show, we don't consider that the same as water, gas, electricity, and phone service. Now, we know in this modern world that internet service is much more essential. So I would say that if this committee wants to explore better ways to make sure that customers of internet service providers are protected, our office would be happy to work with you and do the research and figure that out. It's not an easy call to make.
Representative Kessler, any follow-up?
That's it for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And next, I think we have Representative Nathan Wadsworth. Nate?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Congratulations, Bill.
Thank you, Representative.
And I guess I'll direct this question at Drew. And I had to bounce over to another committee, so if it's been asked, just please let me know. But there's been a lot of talk recently about community solar development and the associated RECs. Is all the renewable energy generated Maine, is that currently credited to Maine's RPS? Because I'm hearing some of those RECs are retired elsewhere.
There is no requirement under the community solar program that those RECs, that any RECs that they generate be used in Maine. Which doesn't particularly trouble me. An issue that prompted me to put a bill, it's actually going to the Legislative Council later today, is concern that the RECs are not being retained by most, if not all, the community solar developers. They're being sold somewhere, and the energy, therefore, that's being consumed by the customers of community solar is not backed by renewable energy. And as a result, in my view, the math works out that the community solar program, at least the KW credit program, not the tariff program, but the KWH credit program, is that customers of those services, if the RECs are sold elsewhere and they haven't acquired other RECs, is more dirty than the power you get from the grid.
Wow, thank you.
Great. Sorry, I was just turning my video back on. So I'm looking around for hands. We have a couple of more hands for questions. Representative Grochowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you both for being here today. I have a quick follow-up question to the previous one, and then a different question. And the follow-up question is, and I know we're going to get into RECs a little bit later, but just while it's fresh in my mind, is it accurate that the long-term contracts we have through the PUC procurement process for renewable energy also do not require that the RECs be sold and retired in Maine? So is it, I'm just saying, is it similar?
That is true. And again, I'm not troubled by the fact that if the community solar isn't selling their RECs in Maine, the question is whether the energy that's being purchased by the customers is backed by RECs, and the obligation on a competitive energy supplier, the standard offer provider, is to deliver energy that meets the renewable portfolio standards. I would say if a long-term contract with a grid scale renewable project is set at market, there should be little or no subsidy to the project. You're really providing a financing mechanism, so there's a certainty of payment. If you're paying above market, you're providing a subsidy, and perhaps we should acquire the RECs, it is part of that contract if you're paying above the projected wholesale market price. But if you're paying the wholesale market price, even if it might be a front-loaded levelized contract over the term, in theory, you might have some subsidy up front that results in a discount on the back end. The real benefit is to help the developer finance and the requirement to sell the RECs in Maine. The PUC has done some RFPs where they acquire the RECs also, and it's a double. They and then they potentially sell those RECs to the standard offer provider, for instance. But to answer your simple question, no, they're not required to sell their RECs in Maine.
Thank you.
You can follow up if you want.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I feel like personally, in some ways, it makes sense to let that market operate separately from the market that is developing and financing the energy. My second question, I think that this can be public information because we're talking about public utilities and cases that you've been involved in. I'd like to know two things. One, what were the two other companies that were the competitive electricity providers that you've been dealing with at the PUC? I'd like to know their names. And the second
There-
one is, which of our two utilities is the one that's not properly submitting planning information that can help you do the non-wires alternative analysis?
The two other companies were Clearview Electric and Town Square Energy. They are listed in our, we don't have a detailed descriptions of the cases, but they're listed in our other electricity cases and in the report. So, and the issue we ran into with the populating the data and the siloed planning was with CMP. We haven't had transmission projects as detailed as the two major projects we've analyzed with CMP. I don't want to give Versant necessarily a clean bill of health based on the fact we haven't found that there yet. But I will say it is generally my impression that their planning is a little more evolved, but that's again, I don't. These are issues that are going to need to be addressed not only for non-wires alternative, but for the DER or the distributed energy resources phase, second phase that the Governor's Energy Office has been working on, and also for grid modernization that the PUC is working on. These issues have to be addressed. You have to have planning tools, or it doesn't work without the tools.
Are you all set, Representative Grochowski?
Yes, thank you for the clarity there. Thanks.
Okay. Representative Cuddy.
Thank you, Senator. Thank you, Mr. Landry, for being here. Thank you, Mr. Hard, for being here. My question, thank you for what you were just saying, Mr. Landry, around RECs being sold out of state. I look forward to having a bigger REC discussion that will help me understand it more deeply, because right now my understanding of RECs is pretty surface. But my question that I had actually wanted to ask was around the staffing levels at OPA. Representative Berry mentioned earlier that a lot of what we are doing, your office's voice is incredibly important. And do you feel you have the staff currently to effectively represent the people of the state of Maine?
You want me to take that, Drew, or you want to take it?
You can give it a shot, Bill, and I probably have some opinion about it. But
Representative, that is one of my priorities for my first few weeks and months on the job. I'm going to be doing a very careful analysis and review of the workload and the staffing at OPA. And you can be sure that if I come to the conclusion that we can better represent ratepayers, we can provide more meaningful support and relief for Maine ratepayers by adding additional resources, I will bring that back to this committee for your consideration.
And I'll just throw out there for context, we're a member of something called the National Association of State Consumer Advocates. And I'm aware that the size of offices around the country varies very dramatically. In New Hampshire, they have a 3-person office. We've got more than that, so that's a good thing. On the other hand, their PUC has a litigation staff, so they handle, they litigate cases, and the public advocate can be more selective about what cases to get involved in. On the other side, I understand that North Carolina, District of Columbia, they have offices with over 100 people. At least in North Carolina, their PUC has no litigation staff, and the public advocate there is charged with litigating every case that comes before the PUC as the equivalent of the district attorney in criminal court. So staffing levels depends somewhat on the model of what you're asking us to do. We have some discretion, unlike other state agencies. We're not like the unemployment office, and if somebody files a claim, you have to do something with it. We can choose to not participate in certain cases. We can choose to participate in some cases on a, monitor and, be ready to jump in kind of basis. But we do have to be selective of the cases we participate in based on our resource levels.
Thank you
Any
both.
follow-up, Representative Cuddy?
No, thank you, Senator.
Okay, I think that concludes our questions. Representative Barry, you had wanted to follow up with some?
I did. Thank you, Senator. And just kind of going back to that same issue of staffing, it's my understanding that the Public Utilities Commission staff, who I know the public advocate can sometimes, through information requests, can ask the PUC staff, who does have a few more resources to look into an issue, to dive into something with a bit more technical expertise than you might have on your staff. But a concern I have is that there's, I believe, just one engineer on the PUC staff, and I'm not even sure that their whole job is engineering. Drew mentioned earlier that the way that projects are engineered is incredibly important because, and I, just to go back to that for a moment, sometimes I heard you say, the transmission that's being proposed is not looking at the distribution capacity that might already exist, or vice versa. And obviously those two systems need to work together in an integrated way. And likewise, the concern that I heard you raise around sort of back of the envelope engineering, engineering that may appear to be less granular or less sophisticated than possible than it should be, and where the solution is not active but passive, right? And I think that's something that we all should really give a lot of thought to. The way that our regulatory and financial incentives for the utilities are set up encourages encourages capital spending, right? If we provide a profit for capital spending, and that's required under the Bluefield decision of the U.S. Supreme Court 100 years ago. So if it's capital, if it's new stuff, then it is profitable, highly profitable, I would say. And if it's just operations and maintenance, it's not profitable. So in that sense, an active solution, although it might be cheaper for customers, is not necessarily preferred financially by the utility. And of course, poor engineering or lazy engineering can just make that worse. So where do our engineers come in? And I suspect you're going to tell me, well, you can hire consultants. And anticipating that, I just want to ask, does it make sense to hire outside engineering consultants who might kind of fly in and fly out, but the institutional engineering knowledge of the grid doesn't accumulate with anyone, either at the PUC or at the OPA staff, who can then apply that knowledge to the next situation? So I hope you understand the question in that. What is our engineering capacity at PUC and at OPA, and how do we create more institutional knowledge and memory around engineering for the very important engineering work that has to happen? Because as the dean of the engineering school at UMaine likes to say, the team with the most engineers always wins.
That was the team with the most lawyers.
It depends. Yeah, I'll ask the main law dean. Maybe I'll get a different answer.
Yeah. I mean, from the NWA coordinator, I mean, we've got some continuity to the extent we continue to use the same consultant. Of course, the risk there is, do we lose the ability to go out to competitive bid because we're so entrenched with a single consultant? And that's a risk that I think there would be tremendous value to have some actual engineers employed, if not at the OPA, at least at the PUC. So I don't disagree with that. And it'd probably be less expensive than relying on consultants all the time. For the cost of, one consulting engagement, you could probably hire a full-time engineer.
Yeah, let me just say, Representative Barry, I agree with everything you said, that there is a built-in incentive for them to invest capital rather than do more maintenance and repair work. And that's something that this office has to pay very close attention to make sure that every time they make those capital investments, that they have really done the cost benefit analysis carefully, and it's carefully reviewed by us and the commission. The other thing I would say is the utilities are understandably conservative. Their job is to keep the lights on. They tend to go with redundancy. They tend to go with practices that have worked in the past that they're comfortable with using. And one of the things our office can do is bring in consultants, engineers from out of state who can say, there's some cutting edge development here where you can save ratepayers money by doing things a little differently than you've done, buying some of the new equipment and facilities. And obviously it's got to be carefully tested and vetted and make sure it's reliable. But we can continue to nudge those utilities in their engineering terms to make sure that they have considered the latest technology.
Great.
Representative Barry, any follow-up?
Yeah, I really appreciate that answer, and I'd like to explore that with you. And just to put a pin in it, I don't necessarily think it has to be an out-of-stater. I think there's some good Maine homegrown talent. Maybe you could put Representative Foster's engineering knowledge to work. When he's done being a legislator. But with that, just turning to another question, the public advocate did what I found to be an incredibly enlightening report, and it was done through an outside study. I want to say Synapse, I'm not sure, in 2019. In summer of 2019, and Drew presented this to us recently, there was a report done on the energy cost burden of Maine utility customers. And, it didn't just stop at energy in the form of electricity. It looked at all the costs of energy, including for petroleum and number two heating oil and natural gas, obviously, which are sourced out of state. So I just found that report to be very, very useful. And, you were speaking a moment ago about economically challenged populations in the rural parts of Maine and urban and geographically challenged, who tend to be more often in the most rural areas. I would really love for us to look at that periodically, to update that report, to look at the burden, both from a geographical standpoint and also an economic standpoint, and perhaps even to fold in telecom. We were just talking about internet. It is a necessity now. It's incredibly expensive, and I'd love to know what the overall telecommunications cost burden is for Maine people as well. So does the public advocate contemplate doing that report again? Is that something you'd be open to? And what might you need from us if so?
I'll let Drew deal with the details, but one of my priorities over the first few months will be to pay close attention to the impact that utility rates have on low-income customers. I know these days are tough when the fuel oil delivery truck shows up in front of my house and leaves a ticket on my door that it costs $500 or $600 to fill up my oil tank. My heart goes out to people, my neighbors and others in the state who are living on fixed incomes, low income. This is a tough time. And as I said during my confirmation hearing, we can't reach the point or go beyond the point where low income customers are forced to choose between paying their utilities and necessities like food and medicine. So we're going to take a hard look. I know the PUC has a rulemaking going on, and maybe, as you say, Representative Barry, we need more outside people to update those studies to really look at what is the impact on low-income people from utility rates so that they have a fair chance to pay those without falling further behind. Happy to, Drew.
Yeah, I'll add a couple of specific things. Number one, I think what we learned, and we may have reported when I testified previously, is that the available federal information has improved dramatically, and we could probably update the report that we issued 2 years ago without even engaging a consultant, honestly, this better public information available that we can digest and get to you. And so we'll look at that. I think probably wait till we get through this crazy winter period. Probably have Kira and Ben take the lead on that. The second thing I want to mention with respect to that, in terms of the geographic overlay, this is something I think that is something that the Office of Policy Innovation in the Future is looking at as part of their directive with respect to environmental justice and frontline communities to try to bring a geographic overlay to these types of issues. So it might be worth coordinating with them where we can cross-reference it. May be able to do it with census data, but they've got, they have the details there. With respect to broadband, I think we could work with either Connect Maine or the Maine Connectivity Authority. I think Connect Maine already has a relatively robust analysis of where services at various speeds are. Trying to bring a price component would require some grunt work. They may have that information, I don't know, but trying to figure out what the prices are, pre and post subsidy across Maine at different speeds. Something that probably could be done. Again, it would require some amount of primary research, but I think it's a doable thing and something that's worth doing.
Representative Barry, any follow-up?
Thank you for the answer to that previous question. I certainly look forward to working with you to make that possible. I think information is always power, right? So my final question is about your prognosis for delivery rates. And if you want to throw in gas and water, feel free, but I'm primarily concerned about electricity. We know that there's been a huge spike in supply rates, and we'll be talking about that more. But the good news from and I appreciate it from your office is that looks like it'll be temporary. We can encourage people to go with competitive energy suppliers in the spring. There's a decent chance that there'll be some good offers coming soon. And that people can, anticipate some changes there. But the T and the D continue to go up. They are more than half the bill typically now, and that was not the case when I came onto this committee. We saw a 13% increase in CMP's overall T&D rate in August, and we saw a 17.5% increase in Versant's T&D rate overall in November. And I think when we talk about these numbers, it's good to remember that we're complaining about a 7% CPI, right? I mean, that's 7% is bad enough, but 13, 17.5, these are real. This is real money. So is in terms of your prognosis, do you see those coming back down and self-correcting, or given some of the restoration costs, is this only going up, which is what we've seen over the past 20 years or so?
I'm going to take this, Bill. Bill, you can talk about the future, but I'll talk about those two increases in particular. Central Maine Powers was this transmission rate increase that we talked about. Yep. And I do believe that number one, transmission rates are going to rise in the future. And I do think, though, that last year's increase, because of this swing between a refund of an over recovery and the now recovery of an under recovery, was unusually large and should level back down. But transmission rates in the region, in the ISO New England region, there's going to continue to be upward pressure on those. And particularly as we see grid modernization and accommodating. So right now, just for reference, Central Maine Power Their capital investment is balanced at about 2/3 transmission and 1/3 distribution. And the increase in cost is largely at the transmission level. And we understand CMP is looking to come in for a distribution rate case this year, or is considering it. That's the word on the street. So they haven't filed anything yet. Versant's increase was entirely a distribution rate increase. They had no transmission rate or no significant transmission rate increase this past year. That was a lumpy increase. I mean, basically, they hadn't had a rate increase in 5 years. So, I think that that's not going to be something that's going to be sustainable. I would assume distribution costs will go up more in an inflationary type number. I will add, though, that the PUC is we're in the proceeding that the commission is trying to complete by March to implement increases in rates for both CMP and Versant related to the rate impacts of distributed energy resources, the two big NEB programs. I don't know what we're looking at for numbers yet, but over the next couple of years, those are going to be significant numbers.
Thank you.
Yeah, Representative Berry, I wish we could say that we're going to be able to hold the line on T&D rates in the future, but I don't want to overpromise or get your expectations. If our office can help keep those as close to inflation or even maybe just below inflation over a longer term, that's certainly something that we will shoot for. As Drew said, that you have to be a little bit careful. These increases are lumpy. They come at different times and they don't come annually. But nevertheless, it's an important thing to pay attention to. And the other thing that I look forward to studying is I want to see how our utilities benchmark against other similarly situated utilities in other states. That will tell us whether the costs that are being passed through to ratepayers are look reasonable. It's another way to test the reasonableness to see. And if it turns out there are areas where our utilities have costs that are significantly above their peers in the rest of, say, New England or even the rest of the country, that's a red flag for us to look into.
Great. Thank you both very much.
President Barry, you all set?
All set.
Look, I don't see any other hands for questions, so I've saved mine till the end. And Bill and Drew, and I think I direct this more at Bill, mine are more long-term and just getting some of your thoughts and directing your attention to what I think are going to be two critical issues, long-term issues that the legislature is going to struggle with, and this committee is going to struggle with. First of all, is regarding, well, they both are regarding climate change. Climate change, obviously, is a key issue, and climate change really involves two components, and that's, I see it as converting your current and future electrical sources to renewable, but also the electrification of your economy in your state. And both of those present great challenges for Maine. We've made steps on getting towards renewable sources, and those will have impact on the consumers, the customers. The electrification of Maine's economy is going to be even more long-term and have greater long-term impact. And to just give you my perspective, currently now we are something like in our economy, only 20% of our economy relies on electricity for its energy sources, and 80% doesn't. And if we move to electrification, particularly in the area of automobiles and homes, we could reach a point where, say, we're at a reverse and be 60% on electricity, 40% on non-electrical sources for energy. If that happens, there's obviously going to be a huge impact on our grid and our ability to modernize and increase our grid rapidly over the coming years. That's going to have a great impact on the customer, the consumer, and how we pay for that, and what are the long-term costs of paying for that. Given we've heard the discussion of how if we have investor-owned utilities do this increase in our grid capacity and build out this grid capacity, that there are built-in costs as profit and things like that. I'm asking you just for your perspectives and to think, what are the alternatives for us as policymakers of finding ways to build out this grid that are going to have less of a cost impact on the consumer?
It's a great question, Senator, and I wish I had a better answer for you. Two things come to mind. One is technology. We've got to make sure we are using the best technology, the lowest cost technology to build out the system. We may not have the luxury of using the old tried and true technologies that have been expensive in the past, and where we have such incredible load growth with heat pumps and electric vehicles. So that's certainly, but the upside, the silver lining that we will be looking for is a lot of the grid can stand more load, particularly if it is off-peak load. So if we can get, with battery storage, some of this new demand for heating and electrification and vehicles to use the grid off-peak, then the unit price doesn't have to go up. The overall revenue will go up. We'll have more kilowatt hours being consumed. But if we can get those kilowatt hours consumed off-peak, we may not see as dramatic an increase in the unit price to all customers if we can make more efficient use of the grid to serve that additional load. But that's something that is going to be hard to do, and it gets into things like rate design. We have to figure out a way so that we can give consumers all the right signals so that they charge their electric vehicle at 2 a.m. when electricity is abundant and cheap, rather than 2 p.m. in the afternoon where electricity is scarce and expensive. That's just one example of how we can accommodate that electrification of the society.
Drew, do you want to chime in on that?
Yeah, I think Bill's exactly right there. And 2 p.m. is actually fine, Bill. That's the peak of the solar, and there's lots of low cost energy available at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's 6 o'clock at night, 5 to 8 hours, and similarly, that 6 to 8 or 9 in the morning are the two system peaks generally. And we need to ensure that our heat pumps and our electric vehicles are not consuming electricity at that point to the maximum extent possible. That's going to require coordination between transmission and distribution planning, efficiency main trust, non-wires alternatives, everything. But I saw one presentation recently where a consultant was talking about, we're going to have triple the peak at 6 o'clock at night in February or January when it's a cold day. It's like, well, we can't afford that. We've got to figure out a way that there's heat pumps can be either cycled, or there can be some sort of a demand response or battery response or something that provides the energy in those periods to avoid having the system peak. But I think a lot of it can be done with some smart devices. There's stuff out, that people are looking at that, for instance, you might plug your vehicle the minute you get home, but maybe, it interacts with the internet so that it knows, okay, this vehicle is completely discharged. We're going to let you charge right now, even though it's a peak. But somebody who's got some charge left, we're going to hold off until 8 o'clock before we start charging. There's things like that can be done. If you leave it to the utilities, they're going to oversize. I could tell you they do something what they would call deterministic planning, which is we're going to assume the worst case scenario. We're going to assume that everybody's running everything at the same time, and they're going to want to oversize the facilities, and we have to fight like mad to keep that from happening.
I appreciate those comments, and that's good about finding those efficiencies. I'm not sure if finding those efficiencies would address all the demand of tripling the amount of electricity going through our system. And we're still gonna have to reach a point where we have to build new infrastructures. I guess my question is, more specifically, is do you see a role for use of public bonding capacity or public financing capacity as a way of reducing costs for the build out of that grid?
I think that raises a whole host of policy questions, Senator, that I'm not prepared to take a position on this morning. I think it is well understood that government can secure capital at a lower rate than private industry. So if that is the answer to this problem, that we need to lower costs, then having government financing of improvements does provide that. Some of it is at the expense of the federal taxpayer, and whether or not that's the policy question about whether state and federal income taxes are going to have to be paid by somebody else if they're not paid on the capital that is secured by the utility. So it involves a lot more significant policy questions that I want to work with this committee and think about.
I wasn't expecting an answer today, Bill. I just kind of wanted to get your initial impression and encourage you to, in the long term, begin you and your staff thinking about that as a way of protecting the consumer and as a way of reducing expenses to the consumer. The other one is another long-term question, and I don't expect you to have an answer to that, but I want to get your initial perspectives and kind of direct you to think about it long-term. If we do electrify a lot of our transportation infrastructure, and GM has announced at a certain point it's going to go to all electric and things like that, we are built in the state of Maine on a policy of financing our roads through the gas tax. If we electrify our transportation, the amount of gas tax being paid is going to drop pretty dramatically, which means the mechanism for financing the roads is no longer going to work. And we have to think of coming up with a new, between us and the Transportation Committee and the legislature as a whole, way of adequately financing our roads in the state. Kind of, what do you think at this point? What are you seeing other states doing? And I'd just like to get your long-term thoughts on how, as consumers, we focus on a way to finance this, that if we put it all on the electric ratepayer, obviously people are heating their homes with electricity, are now going to be paying for roads. Is there a way we can distinguish out motor vehicles? How do we do it?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I will give it a lot of thought. I will just tell you, selfishly, to have one fewer headaches as I learn this job, it would be my preference, but this may not be good policy, to have it between the Department of Motor Vehicles, the Bureau of Taxation, and the vehicle owner, and leave the utilities out of the job of financing our roads and bridges, but that may not be possible. If there's a way to have that taxes imposed on the vehicle owner without involving the PUC and the OPA and the utilities, that would be one less headache for me. But obviously, if it has to come back to utility rate making, we'll address it and see and we'll learn from the other states. I'm a big believer in learning from what other utilities are doing and what other PUCs and what other public advocate, consumer advocates. We don't have a monopoly on the right answers and wisdom, and we're going to continually look out of state to figure out what they're doing.
Drew, have you seen much of what other states are doing? Are they anticipating this issue? Are they beginning to focus in on it?
I have not, but that's something we can certainly look at. It does strike me that, well, first of all, it should definitely not be funded through the general electricity consumer, unless every consumer has electric vehicle. Maybe they will at some point. But it does strike me that there are mechanisms to get at that with individual vehicle owners, whether that's by taxing folks simultaneously with the excise tax, so that you can look at their mileage and tax them based on that. I don't know, but it strikes me it's not it's a problem that probably has a reasonable solution, but it will require some thought.
Well, I can tell you there's no such thing as a reasonable solution when it comes to tax policy, because they're very complex and everybody feels somebody else ought to be taxed for something. But I'd encourage your office to begin to devote some resources to this, encourage to think about it, because it is potentially a potential impact on consumers out there, and it's going to become an issue. I see it becoming a very, very strong issue in the next 5 to 10 years.
Point well taken.
Okay. Any other follow-up questions for the Public Advocate's Office? Seeing none, thank you very much, and
Thank
we
you.
appreciate you coming. For members of the public, this is their annual report to our committee. And the the Public Advocate is a great resource if you have questions about, as a consumer, about your electric bills, about service, about anything. I'd encourage you to use them. The role between our committee and the Public Advocate is we recommend the policy and the legislature adopts the policy of the legislature. The Public Advocate is really the public's attorney in all utility issues, and they have a great amount of expertise. And our role is to see that they get adequate resources and they get the authority to do what they want and they get focused in the right direction. So thank you, Bill and Drew, for coming, and we'll transition them out now, Jason. We are at the bewitching hour of 10:43. So I'm going to ask us to take a little 15-minute break, come back on at 11 when we will hear from the PUC and go over that report. So if you could mute yourself and turn off your video, that would be great. Thank you. Jason, it looks like I'm back on. Could you put my title in front of my name, please?
Yes, I'm on it.
Thank you. And are we live, Jason?
Yes, we are.
Okay. So we are back. It's 11 o'clock in the EUT committee, and we are going to be hearing from the PUC. I just need to look up a text our analyst sent to me regarding the PUC and their presentation. The PUC is going to present for us a rec market overview. It's not based on any particular report, but I can direct the public's attention to the long-term contract report, which is on the EUT website and the PUC's website for information regarding this. So we will go back to the committee. Jason, who do we have here from the PUC to beam across?
We have Matthew Rolnick.
Okay. Why don't you beam him across? Matthew, are you there?
I am. Can you see me?
I'm just looking for you now. And are you going to be the sole presenter from the PUC?
As far as I know, I am today.
Okay, good. So I'll just ask you to introduce yourself, explain what you're going to be talking to us about today, and go ahead with your presentation.
Should I get my presentation set up onto the screen first, or?
Well, why don't you introduce yourself first?
Sure. Senator Lawrence, Representative Berry, and members of the committee, thank you very much for having me here today. My name is Matthew Rolnick. I work as an analyst for the Public Utilities Commission. I've been here for the last 6 years or so. My background is in economics. I have an MBA as well. I've been working in the energy field since 2007. And today, my plan is to talk with you guys about the renewable energy credit and how it functions and how it helps with ensuring that we achieve state goals.
Great. So super, we're going to ask you to bring up your presentation now.
Okay.
And unless there are really urgent specific questions, I'm not going to have people interject with questions. I'm going to have you go through your whole report, and then we'll have questions at the end.
Perfect. So it's always nice when we're having a presentation like this to be able to know what we're talking about and why we're talking about it. So today's presentation is going to be presenting information on renewable energy credits, and you will hear me refer to them as RECs throughout today's presentation. Other places you may have heard of something called renewable energy certificates. These are essentially the same thing as renewable energy credits. The reason I chose to refer to it as credits is they are defined as such in Maine state statute.
And Matt, excuse me, do you have a screen share you wanted to do with the committee, or are you just going to do it orally?
I was planning to do it. So I was thinking that you were seeing my screen right now.
No.
And apparently that's
we
not
need
happening.
to get you set up with a screen share. Can anybody else see his screen?
Not at present.
Hold
Okay,
on.
Jason.
There we go. Here it comes.
There you go. We've got
Sorry,
you set up.
I didn't realize there was one more step. Hold on one moment.
Okay. There we go.
Yeah. Okay.
Looks
Thank
great.
you for, yeah, thank you very much.
Okay.
So as I was saying, it's always nice to know sort of what we're going to be talking about and how and why. So the reason that we need to talk about RECs is that they're the foundation that we use for the state's renewable portfolio standard, and the state's renewable portfolio standard, the RPS, is what we use to ensure that the state achieves the renewable energy goals. And as we electrify our economy, relying on those RECs for tracking renewable electric consumption becomes even more important to ensure that we actually achieve our goals rather than just on paper. So it's always good to begin at the very beginning. So I want to just sort of have a brief conversation about what the grid is, how it works, and how RECs will tie into it. So the way that the grid works is that there's generators. They either are renewables or non-renewables. They put energy onto the grid. And then at the other end, we have consumers who are either residential or commercial and industrial consumers. What we're looking at here is a very simplified version of the grid. And the first point that I'd like to make about this diagram is that you see both renewables and non-renewables go onto the grid and consumers take from the grid, but we have no way of controlling which electrons go from which place to which place. So the grid is sort of, it looks like it's mixed. There's green energy and brown energy on it. And what we're trying to do through the Renewable Portfolio Standard is to increase the level of green energy that is on it. So the first question is, when a commercial or an industrial, when any kind of a consumer turns on the lights, we have an issue that we're considering about sufficiency. Is there enough power on the grid that the lights or the appliances will turn on? And in order to look at that, we're really looking just at the grid in terms of power. But we actually care about something even more than just whether or not there's enough power to keep the lights on. We care about what constitutes the power. Where did the power come from? So another way to think about it is, if we're looking at a renewable generator, when they are producing electricity, they are also producing the attribute of the power that they're generating, the electricity that they're generating. The same thing is true from the renewables. They will also put a megawatt hour of electricity, and then they put an attribute onto the grid, which we don't really want because we don't want the carbon. So another way of thinking about how this attribute can be considered is to think about it as a renewable energy credit. That the renewables, at the time they manufacture electricity, they actually manufacture two streams of value. The first is the megawatt hour of electricity, and the second is the REC. It's important to just have a quick recap of what a REC is at this moment. It represents a specific amount of renewable electricity produced and provided to the grid. In general, and in Maine, one REC equals equals 1 megawatt hour of electricity. So a REC is matched to a megawatt hour. All RECs for use in fulfilling Maine's portfolio standard are uniquely numbered and tracked. And it's very important that that happens so that the same REC is not sold over and over again. Commission rules require that the RECs be recorded in NEPL GIS if they're being generated in CMP and Versant's Bangor Hydro District, and in the NAR registry if they're in the NMISA control area. In the state of Maine, we have these two registries that track a REC from its creation until its retirement, and that REC can be traded anywhere that is willing to accept it. The other reason I want to emphasize this, and we'll come back to it, the state in which the REC is retired is the state that gets the credit for the renewable energy consumption. So if we have just a quick review of what we're looking at again, we have our renewables and non-renewables that are putting energy onto the grid, making sure that there's sufficient energy for the residential and industrial and commercial consumers. We have no way of getting power from one specific generator to one specific customer. It doesn't work that way. So what happens if this business says, I want to have 100% renewable energy? Well, this customer, this business, has a couple of different ways they could go about it. One option is they could build their own renewable energy, hook up to it. They can island themselves from the grid, because that way they know they're not getting any non-renewable energy. They can put batteries in place. They can curtail their business operations for periods of low generation and to optimize high generation. They can do all of these different things, and then they can tell the whole world that they're 100% green energy. That's maybe not the way that they're going to want to do it. That's very expensive, and it's not very scalable. And in fact, it wouldn't really solve the problem that the state that the committee is trying to solve. Another way they could do it would be to procure from one of the renewables generators a stream of power. But if they only buy the power from the wind generator, that electricity is not actually green electricity. That electricity is just the megawatt stream of electrons. What they have to do is they also need to buy the RECs at the same time. If that generator does not sell the business customer the RECs, then that business customer does not have a claim to 100% renewable energy. And you may say, why? That doesn't seem fair. But the reason is because that renewable energy credit could be purchased by somebody else who's also who could be purchased by somebody else. So if the person who purchases the REC and the person who retires the REC are two different people, they can't both claim the same renewable resource, because it would be a double counting of what's happening. And that would not help us with getting to carbon reduction. So as a state, we're trying to increase the amount of renewables that are in the pool. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get from something that looks like this today to something that looks like this in 2030, where we have 20% 80% renewables and 20% non, to something that looks like this in 2050, where everything on the grid is renewable. This is how the RECs come into play on this. In Maine, in Chapter 35A, Section 3210, the legislature has defined the state goals for achieving renewable energy, which are 80% of renewables by 2030, 100% by 2050. It takes the time to define the RECs as a tradable instrument that represents the electricity so that we can have that. It creates 4 different classes of renewable attributes, which we track, and I will talk about that in a minute. And then it creates the obligation of the renewable portfolio standard through the competitive energy and the standard offer providers. Now, why do we have the competitive energy providers and the standard offer providers being responsible for procuring the renewable portfolio standard RECs? The reason is because in Maine, the transmission and distribution utilities have no responsibility for procuring load. The actual electricity that flows through the wires comes from an entity other than the transmission and distribution utilities. So the idea behind this is that the entity which is procuring the load is best suited to ensure that it comes from renewable sources. This slide here is showing 2 things. The first is a summary of what the different types of RECs are that we have. In this case, I've grouped class 1 and 1A together as one class. When we do our report reviews, we actually look at them separately because that's how they're written up in the statute. The idea behind a class 1 or 1A REC is that it's a renewable resource that's coming from a newer plant. So in Maine, we've got that defined as post 2005. There was a new type of REC which has been created called a thermal REC, and that facility needs to begin operation after 2019. And then another type of REC that we have is class 2. And class 2 facilities generally consist of non-refurbished pre-2005 biomass, hydro, and efficient resources. And their facilities have not had a major refurbishment or update, which would qualify them for the more valuable class 1A. The graph on the left is showing where the renewable portfolio standard for the state of Maine is today. What is expected of if a consumer is using electricity in Maine, how much of the electricity that they're using is from a renewable resource. And I want to be really specific here as well. The state's goals are written in terms of percentage of electricity sold, not percentage of electricity generated. So that's why the RECs become so much more important, because a generator being in Maine doesn't necessarily mean that Maine is actually actually getting the renewable energy from that generator. We're part of the ISO New England, which is a larger market, and the RECs become an increasingly important part of tracking how consumers are having the ability to claim their renewable energy. This slide I've put in because I think it shows very clearly some of the market dynamics that are at play with a REC, with renewable energy credits, with a REC. This is excerpted from NEPOOL GIS's generator logs. And in NEPOOL GIS, they are one of the tracking agencies, if you will, of renewable energy credits in New England. In NEPOOL's system, they have 34 different types of RECs that they track from all the different New England states. And the main point that I want you to get from here when you look at this is that these RECs are fungible. It's like having $100 in your account, but if you spend that $100, you don't have that $100 anymore, right? So if you have a REC in your account and you retire it, then you've consumed it. If you trade it, then you don't have the REC anymore either. So this is why the registries are so important. And the registries make sure that when a megawatt hour is created from this facility in Rhode Island, this wind facility in Rhode Island, the registry will make certain that the RECs that it sells, it may be selling RECs into 5 different states, but it will make sure that no single REC is sold more than once. The other reason I wanted to bring this up is that the prices in each marketplace are going to vary. Because if you think about it, why would this wind facility go to all of the effort to register in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different states? The reason is because there's a price difference in each state, and the wind facility will look for the highest bid that they can find to sell their REC. The generation, just as a reminder, is a market-based product in New England. It is not subject to regulation, to price regulation. And so the entities that are doing the generation are profit-seeking entities. I put this slide in because I thought it was really important as we're talking about how cost effects on pricing take place. I got this information from the marketing plan for 3 Degrees, which is a renewable, what they do is they will, if a consumer would like to have 100% renewable energy, they can have something added to their bill where they will be purchasing RECs. This is a creation of the legislature, the program is, and it's administered by the PUC. And what these graphs are showing us is that prices were pretty low for a little while here, And as the renewable portfolio standard is increasing in its strictness, then we're seeing an increase in prices as well. And these prices are, I just wanted to make sure that was there. So just to summarize, the renewable portfolios, these are a few thoughts that I just want to leave you with as we think about RECs and their impact on the renewable portfolio standard. The RECs are a form of currency. They are used for tracking of various state mandates in various states. They can be purchased by businesses, individuals, competitive electric providers, different entities can purchase them. I have heard that there are some environmental organizations that will buy them and retire them. The issue is that a REC can only be retired once. So only one entity gets the credit for the renewable attribute of what is generated. Facilities have to be qualified to provide RECs. In Maine, we have our own specific guidelines for class 1, 1A, and thermal. The facilities must seek approval from the Maine Public Utilities Commission and be registered. Many of those resources are also registered to other states. And also a generator who is out of state can provide the resource to Maine, just like Maine-based generators can provide the resource to an out-of-state market. And last but not least, the CEPs, the competitive energy electricity providers, and the standard offer providers file compliance reports with the showing their compliance with the RPS with the Public Utilities Commission. The next report that I just wanted to provide, I've been asked to provide to you, is the annual report on long-term contracts. And there we go. So under the 35A 3210C3, we've been asked to report on procurements that we have conducted or plan to conduct under the authority that was granted to us in Chapter 3210C. We did not conduct a competitive solicitation in 2021. The commission did approve non-substantive amendments to a set of power purchase agreements that were awarded in a prior 3210C solicitation. There has been no determination as yet whether a 3210C solicitation will be conducted in 2022. The next type of long-term contract that we are reporting on is the community-based renewable energy pilot program. The authority to award contracts governed by this program expired in December 31, 2015. Therefore, no solicitation was held and no solicitation is planned. The last is the competitive solicitations pursuant to the Deepwater Offshore Wind Energy Pilot Program. The commission did not conduct any competitive solicitations under this authority either. The commission no longer has authority to award additional contracts governed by this program, and therefore there are no future solicitations planned. The above market costs, or rather the contract costs of wholesale market revenue for these long-term contracts for the 12-month period ending December 2021 totals approximately $16.3 million. And that's all I have to say on that. And if you have other questions, I'm happy to try to answer them. Hello?
Hold on one
Thank you.
second, Matt. Are you all done with your presentation?
I am. Should I stop my screen share?
Nope. Yeah, if you could stop your screen share. So we'll go into questions, and I'll ask members to raise their hands if they have questions. We'll start off with Representative Barry.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Rolnick, for that excellent presentation. I think it was very helpful for all of us to kind of break it down. And we might want to delve a little bit more into the last couple slides. There was a lot in that, but I think that report on procurement does raise kind of a bigger contextual question that I would find it very helpful for you to kind of remind us about, and that is the difference between our procurement policies using the tool of long-term contracting and our procurement policies, which are embedded in the renewable portfolio standard. As you've just reviewed very helpfully, the RPS is really driven by REC procurement, but we also do engage in long-term contracting. So when a long-term contract is signed by the PUC pursuant to the statutory requirements that you obey, what is it that we are getting as a state if we're not purchasing RECs?
So I am happy to answer this conceptually.
Yeah.
I do not have in front of me the specifics of all of the contracts that we've conducted.
Understood.
And I don't have the statute directly in front of me.
Big picture is great. Thank you. Yep.
Okay. So conceptually, the long-term contract provides a financing mechanism to the creation of the generation. So, and I am not a solar developer, but anecdotally, it's my understanding that in order for a developer to get financing, they need to be able to say to a bank, look, we're going to get a regular source of income on this. And so the function, so that's part A. When the statute in Maine does not require that a long-term contract purchase the RECs. I believe it says long-term contract for generation and or RECs. And so I think that's the difference between the long-term contracting. If the question that Maine RPS was looking to solve was how much generation we had, how much the renewable portfolio standard has. If the question were how much generation is in the state of Maine that's renewable, that is a very different question, and that is answered very differently than how do we make sure that Maine electric consumers are consuming renewable power and ensuring that we're getting rid of carbon-based sources. Did that answer your question?
It was very helpful, and I think it's something that we probably should talk about more on the committee. So I think it was a great start, and I'll just follow up with one additional question, if I may, Mr. Chair, and seeing no objection. The example is often cited on this committee of a particular long-term contract for some solar, I believe it's in Hancock County, which came in at about 2.9 cents per kilowatt hour. And that is often compared to, other solar production for which we pay more. And could you help to remind us, is that 2.9 cents all that we are paying for typically in a retail electricity bill, or is there some additional cost that's typically layered onto the consumer in the form of cost for RECs, cost for retailing, and so on?
So I'm not intimately familiar with that particular example, so I can get you specifics on that one. I think conceptually, what happens during a long-term contract is there's a conversation that goes into evaluating which ones are awarded that includes questions like you asked, like exactly what's included in it, like what are the adders, what are the minuses, what are we getting for RECs, who's getting it, and that is all subject to pretty extensive negotiations between the commission, the developer, and the utility. And so I wouldn't be comfortable opining, but if you'd like, I can certainly inquire and we can.
Thank you. Just to clarify, I meant that as an example.
Okay.
But if let's say that there's a long-term contract for a renewable resource, which only includes the energy and not the associated RECs. And let's say that comes in at 2.9 cents. Okay. So is the 2.9 cents going to be effectively the cost to procure renewable energy all in to the main consumer, or will the main consumer typically pay some additional costs that may not be reflected in that 2.9 cents figure that we often hear about?
Yeah, so I think to answer your hypothetical, if the contract terms are energy only, if that's really what the contract says, then it's energy only, and then then the recs have to come from someplace else. If the contract is energy plus, recs sufficient to meet Maine's renewable portfolio standard, then you would look to each year and say, we got 40% here, 40, 42, whatever it's going to be going through that increase. If the contract were to say energy plus recs, then it would say energy plus recs. So I think that's an important, at the commission, we try to be generally very precise about how we use those terms.
And just ballpark, and I promise I'll end this question here, but give us a sense of scale. The cost of energy that's associated with one of those contracts might be over half, under half, a quarter. Keep it to the nearest quarter, if you could, of our retail bill. And I just we'll keep that within supply, because I don't want to get into T&D, but of our overall supply cost stack, if you will, a long-term contract for energy only, if it's in the order of 2.9 cents and it's energy only, and given where the market is now, how might you estimate that what would it come closest to? A quarter, a half, 3/4, or all of my bill?
Yeah, so I'm going to speak to the mechanisms for how those costs get recovered, and I'm going to say what I say subject to check, because I work on some of these parts and not others.
Great.
To the extent that the way that the contracts are evaluated when they come in is to look at them in the context of economic benefits, as well as whatever policy objectives were given to look at them in. To the extent that the energy, my understanding, and again, subject to check, the energy from the contracts is sold into the market, and then the shortage between whatever their fixed price is and what they got in the market goes into a stranded cost. And so I could get that number for you. I personally don't know what that number is off the top of my head, but so the cost of those contracts is then there, sort of moved along. Is that helpful? I'm trying.
Well, we're not at the point of estimating the rough fraction of my bill, and I think the point of my questioning here is just to illustrate that some of these long-term contracts, people are confused and think that we're getting renewable energy for 2.9 cents, and that's simply not the case. And I think that's the point of my question. So I appreciate your answer. If you want to provide some follow-up information, that would be great. But we are simply not getting, and I hope the committee is fully aware of this, renewable energy from grid scale production for 2.9 cents per kilowatt hour delivered to your home. That's just not happening. So I wanted to continue to pursue the conversation to the extent the committee wants to, but I think your answers are helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and that is it's any energy purchase in which the RECs are not explicitly retained. They are in any energy purchase in which the utility is not maintaining the RECs, or like there's a default. So unless we're explicitly retaining them, they are going to the provider, and then the provider can do with them as they please.
Great, thank you.
Representative Cuddy.
Thank you, Senator. And thank you, Mr. Rolnick, for your presentation. And I really thank you for sort of starting from the basics and moving forward, because every time I talk about RECs, my head spins. And so it's good to have as much in terms of basics as possible. And I think I'm getting at a similar question to what Representative Barry was just asking, but I'm coming from a place of so much less sophistication. What I'm interested in knowing is, how does the REC affect the cost of electricity in the state of Maine? What I understand from your presentation is that the REC is purchased by an entity, be it a homeowner through the 3D graph that you showed us, that through that company, or a business who's purchasing it from a larger entity, generation entity. How then does a REC influence the cost of electricity to a homeowner or to a commercial or industrial user?
So in terms of I'm not going to be able to give you a number at this moment anyways, but I can explain it sort of conceptually. The REC is an obligation on the power supply, the load, and those are purchased by the standard offer provider. Obligation. So we get on an annual basis from those providers a report that says we bought X number of RECs. And in general, they're supposed to tell us our average cost is blah, blah. And then we, in our annual compliance report, we actually have some numbers in there. I caution you to take those with more than a grain of salt. They are reported by non-regulated entities directly to us and reported directly as they're reported to us. We have limited visibility into that. It is something that gets factored into the cost of electricity, the cost of supply. So because that is a cost that those contracts are done usually on 1 to whatever number of years, the supplier will factor that in. So I don't have a good way of getting to exactly how much of a percentage that is of the regular bill. What I am able to share is that anecdotally, and this is, the graphics I showed from the Maine Green Power presentation generally comport with my understanding of what's happening in the market, which is that as renewable portfolio standards become stricter, the cost of compliance will continue to increase. And we are seeing that that's what's happening with the RPS. However, in the absence of a REC, there's no other way of tracking to make sure that we're actually increasing the general supply of renewable and displacing gas.
Thank you. Yeah, and I appreciate it. I was looking for that sort of conceptual answer and the mechanism by which RECs affect the price, as opposed to how much they are, because I don't need to get that deep in the weeds. So I think you've given me a good answer there. Thank you.
Great. Any follow-up, Representative Cuddy?
No, thank you, Senator.
Okay, Representative Grochowski.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Rolnick, for being here. I have a couple questions, and I think I'll try to go from what I think is maybe the easiest to the hardest. And if that's okay, Senator, I'll just go through them and stop me if I'm monopolizing the time. The first one I just wanted clarity on was the RECs that we are talking about. Do they have to stay within their own independent grid system? So in the case of ISO New England, they can only be traded and retired within ISO New England, or is there access to nationwide REC markets? I don't really have clarity on that. So
again, I'm sharing anecdotally how I understand the REC markets work. I'm not a REC trader. My understanding is that a facility can be registered and they can sell their RECs anywhere, right? So for example, there are some windmills in Omaha that can buy RECs. A windmill in Omaha, if you were an individual consumer and you just wanted to know that you were generating, renewable energy, you could buy RECs from windmill in Omaha. So I imagine that where the facility is, the way I understand it, where the facility is located is not as important in all circumstances.
And to follow up on that, because I feel like I had heard that, is that constrained to the United States only?
So I have spoken with energy managers that maybe are working for large corporations that are trying to understand how they can reduce their carbon footprint. And they may actually decide that carbon is the attribute that's really important to them. So they'll go out and procure, instead of procuring main class 1 RECs, because it's about the company making their own statement about the fact that they want to have a lower carbon footprint, they will support something, for example, like nuclear energy, and they'll go out and buy zero carbon nuclear RECs. Those are not as competitive a market as, for example, a Massachusetts solar class 1. So it depends on what the purpose of the REC is. If you're talking about compliance, we have certain restrictions. If you're talking about, wanting to have bragging rights, it's a whole different world, And
Thank you. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
That's really helpful. The next one I had was, I think it's to sort of follow up on Representative Cuddy's question. I'm going to make a statement and you can tell me if it's accurate or not, because I think that'll be easier than me trying to frame it as a question. My understanding is that the cost of the RECs would come through onto somebody's bill within their supply standard offer or CEP cost, but that the cost of us engaging in a long-term contract through that PUC bidding process would come through as a stranded cost in our bill. Is that accurate?
So you're actually comparing apples and oranges.
I get that.
You're accurate.
Where does it show up though?
Yeah. So you're accurate, but they're two very different things, and that's the only place I want to put a pin in. The cost of the RECs, which comes through the cost of power, that is an embedded cost, just like the cost of the long-term contracts or the benefits of the long-term contracts come through as an embedded cost in the standard offer supplier specifically, because that's where I just gonna leave it there, because I think if I start talking about that mechanism, my head might explode too.
Okay, so to just clarify, both of those costs are coming through in our standard offer line on our bill, not in the stranded cost line of the bill. And maybe you could get back to me.
Maybe I didn't. I don't think I got that accurate, but I think that rather than muddying the waters, I'm going to take that back as in the commission we say as an ODR, as an oral data request. So I will. I'll take that back, and we'll get something for you on that. That'll be much clearer.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I was hoping that was an easy question, but I didn't have an answer, so it was hard for both of us. If I may, Mr. Chair, I have just a couple more. I can cede the floor for a minute or two. Up to you.
No, go right ahead, Representative Grahowski.
Okay, thank you. This is for my clarity. It's related on what is happening when we long-term contract. So Representative Barry used the example of 2.9 cents. Okay, that is something that's being paid by the main ratepayers based on exactly how much energy is actually generated from those contracted facilities. Those facilities, are they also selling their energy into the market and getting compensated for that generation based on, what is the price of the day and all that forecasting that happens? So I don't know what the right terms are for. So are they having two revenue streams just for energy and then a separate revenue stream for RECs? That's the question.
So I'm going to explain this subject to correction, but the way it works, as I understand it, is Energy Plant A says we're engaging in a contract at, I'm just going to use 10 cents a kilowatt hour because it's like an easy number, 10 cents, right? So we're going to engage in a 20-year contract for 10 cents a kilowatt hour. They go through a bunch of negotiations with the Public Utilities Commission and the utilities. We come up with a contract that appropriately shares risk. And then the Public Utility Commission says, this contract, based on what we see for energy market forwards and whatever policy objectives we've been given, we see this as a valuable contract. T&D utility sign a contract with generator A. T&D utility will then pay for every megawatt hour or every kilowatt hour generated, will pay 10 cents a kilowatt hour because that's what the contract price is. T&D utility then says, we're going to dump this energy into the real-time market or the day-ahead market, depending on the terms that were negotiated in the context of the contract. And we're going to dump it onto X market, and whatever money comes in inures to the benefits of ratepayer. So if the facility, generator A, is dumping a megawatt hour in when a megawatt hour, a kilowatt hour in when a kilowatt hour is 20 cents because it's a peak time, then the 10 cents benefit inures to the benefit of the ratepayer. If they're generating electricity in the middle of the night when it's 3 cents a kilowatt hour, that 7-cent difference inures to the detriment of the ratepayer. The ratepayer makes up that difference. So over the course of a whole year, whatever revenues come in, we kind of figure it out. And that's that number that we reported, that 16 million is net of the money that cleared. Did that make sense?
That made perfect sense, and I thank you for that because I didn't have that understanding before. So I really appreciate that. I don't know if my colleagues, hopefully it made sense for everybody, so we're on the same page. But and I think it just one or two more. One of the things that I've been curious about is what's driving the cost of RECs. I think I can think of a couple of things, like what is the demand in the region, such as, what is Massachusetts looking for and Vermont looking for renewable, their own RPS, and then the amount of supply that's available, which, as I understand it, sort of why we do this procurement for long-term contracts, so we can make sure there's supply. Are there other things? Firstly, am I right on that? And secondly, are there other things that are driving the cost of RECs that we should be thinking about?
So I just want to make sure I got your question correct. Your question was, what's driving the cost of RECs? What are the different factors? And what else should we be thinking about as we're looking to understand those factors? Is that another way of kind of?
Yeah,
Okay.
That's great. Because, we see those graphs where the price is going up and I want to understand what's causing that.
So I think there are a lot of different things that can, I'm just trying to look through my presentation to see if there's information I need to reshare, but I think we're okay. So my background is in economics, and my favorite thing to say is everybody loves a market until they don't. The market's always the solution until it's not. So as more states, as more consumers, let's just start at the very basic level. As more consumers decide that they want to have more renewable energy, that increases demand. As demand increases, what happens to price? Price increases. So as more states respond to the call to have less carbon, there will be more of a demand for renewable energy credit. The physical reality of the grid today is that we can't flip a switch and tomorrow will be 100% on renewables. We have to actually increase the percentage incrementally because the laws of physics. And so in order for us to ensure that more renewable is getting onto the grid, we have to actually make sure that the RECs are only counted one time. And as the requirement to switch over to renewable electricity gets greater and greater, there will be more pressure on prices if and unless there's much more coming onto the grid, much more coming onto the market. Yeah, did that answer the question?
Yeah, I think those are the basic factors I had in mind, but I didn't know if there was anything else. And I guess I'd add this nuance that was my final question, which was, it's been brought to my attention that this might or might not be related, that there is one class of RECs or class 2 RECs that doesn't have an alternative compliance payment, which is sort of like a pressure release valve for if the REC prices go too high. And so I'm trying to understand, not only are there forces in play other than just basic supply and demand, does the lack of an ACP affect that? And are there just other things that like I'm not aware of, don't even know how to ask about, that are affecting those rising rates?
So the alternative compliance payment is in legislation, and what that was, my understanding of what that functions to do is as a cost containment measure. So if, for example, RECs became super duper duper scarce and they skyrocketed beyond, I believe, I'm not 100% sure, but I think that the ACP currently is at $50 for a class 1. And I'm pretty sure you're correct that there's not an alternative compliance payment on the class 2. But I would have to check that, double check that. So if the price were to skyrocket above $50 a megawatt hour, then you would be able to make your payment as an alternative compliance payment rather than having to go out to the market. Once in a while, there are some providers who will choose to use an ACP just because administratively they have such a small load, it's just easier for them. But in general, the function of an ACP is to provide like a way that if somebody can't afford to do the RECs, it gives them a cap of what, of what it would be. I feel like there was another part of your question I didn't answer, and I'm trying to remember what it was. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. I have a lot of questions. I have to try to remember as well. It seems to me like without that pressure release valve and the supply and demand tension, that could be part of what drives the cost up. But the final question was, is there really any other thing that's driving costs other than supply and demand?
Yeah.
Like any regulatory structures or just other things that we should be aware of?
Yeah, I think, so I think that what's going on in other states is a very big driver of costs, because if, as we saw with the Rhode Island wind project, they have Connecticut class 1, Massachusetts RPS class 1 renewable, and Massachusetts CES, Massachusetts Maine class 1, Maine class 2, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and Vermont. If any, they're going to sell to the highest bidder on any one of those. And so if, so there's going to be a price convergence that this is just the laws of economics, right? Like it's a profit maximizing entity and they're going to try to maximize their profits. And so we're competing with those. So until, if they're registered in multiple places, and there's nothing that requires any of the generation coming online in any state to be registered any place. Like, so, Massachusetts doesn't have a well, I can't speak about other things. In Maine, we don't have a requirement that if you're a generator in Maine, you're registered in Maine to sell Maine class 1, because it's not there. So, I think, creating more supply and requiring it. I'm not sure what other regulatory options there are within the state. I can talk about the market dynamics that happen between things anecdotally, but that's about it.
Thank you. Appreciate you answering all my questions.
Are you all set, Representative Grohowski?
Yes.
For now?
Yeah, let's qualify that just in case I get another thought experiment going, Senator.
Representative Foster?
Thank you, Chair Lawrence. I do have a comment and a couple of questions. Thank you, Mr. Rolnick, for your presentation here today. First, my comment early on in your presentation, as you were showing your slides going from brown to green generation, you made a comment which I don't believe is the policy or the charge for the PUC, but you said that we are more concerned about going from brown to green than we are in keeping the lights on. And I don't think that that's true, because if we were, we wouldn't be still depending on backup of brown energy users, generators. And going forward, as we rely more and more on more unreliable generation with wind and solar from time to time, that's, I believe, got to be one of the concerns for the PUC. And I know it is for ISO New England on how are we going to keep the lights on. So I only bring that up because I think you were making that as an ideal comment that, ideally, this is where we would go.
If I apologize if I said more than, I don't actually, if I said more than, that was a misspeak. I think keeping the lights on is very important in ISO New England. That is the tantamount to not only, it's not their only concern, but it is the tantamount concern. And it is very important. I think what I had intended to say, if I misspoke, was that not only do we care about keeping the lights on, but it's also very important to us, because the reason that we have the state energy goals is because it's very important to us. It's not just the electrons, but also where the electrons come from, is what I was trying to say. I apologize. Thank you for catching that.
I'll agree with that. I just want to make sure we are on record here. So my questions, first of all, you mentioned the 16.3 million long-term contracts, what the cost was above market cost for 2021. Can you provide for us, I believe that not all of those maybe, but a lot of those have year-to-year increases in their contracts. And for instance, let's say it's 2%. For those that do, based on similar numbers for 2022. In other words, let's just assume that it's that 16.3 million again. What would that overall 16.3 million look like in 2022 with those increases that are written into the contracts? That's my first question. I'll go on to my second, unless you know that off the top of your head.
I don't know that off the top of my head, but I do just want to make a clarifying question, if it's okay.
Sure.
And I just want to make sure I understand your request. So your request is, here we are in 2021 last year, and all of the prices were X of all of the different contracts. In 2022, those prices are going to be Y, some of which may be higher than they were in 21. How much will our costs be going forward into 2022? And I will do my best to see what we have for information on that. There may be a challenge doing that, because when we're looking back on 2021, we know what the energy costs were, so we're able to take the contract costs into. So looking forward, there's going to be an increase there may be an increase in contract price, but there also may be an increase in energy costs, or a decrease. So it may be a little harder to identify what that is, but I will take this back to my team and see what we can come up with for you. Does
yes, that's correct. And also, obviously, 2022 is going to be affected by the new standard offer, which is significantly more so. And I'm not sure if each and every one of these contracts is tied to that at all, but I know that I believe that some of them do have an automatic cost increase figure factored into there when they put their bids in and when those bids were accepted.
For point of clarity, I believe that when we are calculating the market cost, it's not the standard offer, but it's against what it costs in the wholesale market. The standard offer is the cost that's to main consumers, right? And that includes wholesale procurement and a whole bunch of other things, including racks and delivery and transit and stuff like that. So I will work with my colleagues and see what we can come up with that might be a meaningful number for you. I think what I'm hearing you say is you're trying to get a sense of, in 21 it costs us this much. Here's kind of what we can expect to see in 22. And I'm not sure exactly how we would do that, but I'm happy to talk with them and see what we can come back with.
Correct. Thank you. And if I may, Mr. Chair.
Go right ahead.
So you mentioned that some groups, such as some environmental groups, have retired recs. Can you just walk us through kind of, layman's terms, what that looks like? In other words, they acquired the recs and then they retired or sold the recs, and how, why, how much, that kind of thing, just roughly. Thank you.
So I can speak on this on an anecdotal level and a conceptual level. I don't have direct knowledge of it happening in today's market. As I said, I've been working in energy for a number of years before I came to work at the commission, and it was one of the concepts in the early days of the renewable energy credits was during a period of time that people were not necessarily trying to buy them, that a given nonprofit whose mission is to reduce carbon could actually go out and buy the RECs and retire them. The purpose behind it would be to help increase the cost of RECs to encourage more people to go on to develop renewable energy. Particularly in the early days of renewable energy development, the different cost streams were very important, and they still are. But that was just something that they had done. And I think the point that I was trying to make in the context of this presentation, and I apologize if I muddied the waters, the point I was trying to make is that any entity could buy them. So, a competitive energy provider that buys 100% renewable gas to get the electrons onto the grid, a competitive electric provider that buys 100% gas to get the electrons onto the grid can then go out and purchase the RECs from wherever they need to for compliance purposes, or they can buy 100% gas, put on the grid, and then they can have a voluntary product that they go out and buy the RECs for to cover it. So that was sort of what I was trying to show. I hope I didn't mean to confuse things if I did.
No, that's what I suspected, but I appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay, we have Representative Cuddy.
Thank you very much, Senator, and thank you, Mr. Rowling, for all of these answers and all this information that you are giving us. Earlier, you mentioned that the PNC ensures that the contract appropriately shares risk between the developer and ratepayers. What is the risk, and how does the contract control it?
So I think this is a place where I'm going to, I don't want to, so what I'd like to do actually is perhaps we could provide something to the committee that talks about the commission's considerations during the course of long-term contracting, so that it can be a little clearer, because this is something that I've worked on, but I've not been lead on those projects, and I would be afraid to misspeak.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'd rather have you take the time to put something together like that. Thank you.
Any follow-up, Representative Cuddy?
No, thank you.
I'm assuming none. So Representative Barry?
Great. Mr. Rolnick, you were absolutely correct about the $50 mark for alternative compliance payments. That's a maximum in statute, which can be set at a lower amount in rule. And so I guess, that does lead me to the question, as the cost of RECs is going up, do you see us approaching the $50 mark? I can't recall exactly the numbers that you have, but could you just speak about the potential for reaching that, how close we are to that? And secondly, just remind us, and if you, this may not be your wheelhouse, but I know the ACM payments are used for other purposes. They go into the so-called Energy Efficiency and Renewable Resource Fund at the PUC, and That's used to fund R&D and demonstration rebates for renewable energy technology. So it's really that amount is completely diverted from the rec market, and I'm just curious to know if if that could be self-defeating in the sense that perhaps putting that money, that reduced amount into the rec market might be a better way to go forward. So I want to be careful here. I know you probably don't want to advise us on policy, but if there's a significant amount someday going into alternative compliance payments, and all of that money is being diverted from the rec market, is that potentially self-defeating in getting to that 100% goal that we ourselves set in statute?
So I understand there are two parts to your question. One is sort of where do we see the market going?
Yep.
And the other is whether ACP payments, right? Okay. So,
yeah, could they be self-defeating?
Yeah,
I guess
so I can't, you're correct. I cannot advise you on policy. So on I'm going to start with the mechanics of what your question is, and then we'll come back to the pricing question. If you don't buy a rec, you do not have renewable energy, period, full stop. So if a competitive electricity provider uses the alternative compliance payment as a method of making penance for the fact that they did not buy a rec, that what they're saying is, I didn't put renewable energy onto the grid, but hey, here's some money. So if that's, what the state wants as a policy, we can track that. but the mechanics, I want to be really clear. If you don't have a rec, you don't have renewable energy. You're not forcing renewable energy into that pool. Remember, there was a pool, and we're trying to get it so the greater likelihood is that you're getting a green electron rather than a brown electron, right? So that's the mechanics. In terms of the pricing, I can only speak anecdotally. I do not spend a lot of time in the markets, and we don't have a tremendous amount of visibility. We have seen the prices skyrocketing. I actually shouldn't say skyrocketing. We've seen the prices going up pretty rapidly. So, where is it going to go? And this is me, I'm sure opinions, everybody's got one. I would not be surprised if we were to see prices converging at what some of the other New England states are paying. So if you wanted to have a sense of where they were going, and my rationale behind that is looking at it as an economist, like people are always going to look for the highest thing. So if state X has the highest cost per rec, then everybody's going to try to sell there, and then only after they're no longer able to get that one, they'll start going down the pipe. Did that answer the questions you were asking?
I think partially the question around whether allowing alternative compliance mechanisms could be self-defeating to our renewable portfolio goals. I think the answer I heard was yes. And the question around where we're going with respect to prices and how close we are to $50 is that's really the question I'm still left with. Is you mentioned maybe going where other states are. I neglected to jot down on your slide, and I've forgotten now. The prices are currently at what and rising?
So I want to be really cautious about the data I'm giving you, because because it's not a completely, I don't have it down to the penny here. I'm just looking at the graph.
Yep.
And it's not necessarily I'm not 100% sure what's in there, but they're indicating prices on class 1, and I believe I'm not sure if it's this year's vintage or next year's vintage, so there's a lot of caveats, but they're indicating prices that start with a 3 in the 30s, right at the moment. And that's consistent with what I've seen in other sources. So I like I said, I don't have I don't have my finger on the pulse of it, and the market is a little more fragmented than, for example, the NYSE market or something like that. So,
got it. And just one final clarification, if I may, the main renewable portfolio standard is different because we do allow biomass to qualify, and we have some other, I'll say, unique portions of our RPS, burning of waste, for example, incineration qualify. So I think biomass is maybe the biggest difference. Existing hydro too, perhaps, which we do have a lot of. So does that help? My question really is, does that help to keep Maine's costs down for RECs relative to the New England market?
so every state has their own way of defining what they consider to be renewable, and there's a number of policy considerations that go into it. And you're correct. In Maine, we do have, we will consider a plant that's done a refurbishment since 2005, been in continuous operation, and is burning biomass in whatever form, will be class 1. And not every state in New England has that. So to the extent that there's a smaller market that we're competing with for a particular type of REC, then the cost of that REC is likely, I'm not going to say it will be, but there's a good opportunity that it will be less expensive because there's fewer places to sell it, right? If it's too narrow, and we were to say, just as a hypothetical example, only RECs from a very, very, very narrow specific geographic region must be in there, and they must be in there in a certain quantity, then those could become very expensive RECs very quickly. So there's some mechanics at play, but you're on to the right. You're framing it in a way that is consistent with how I would frame it.
Thank you.
Representative Barry, are you all set?
I think so. Yeah, we can follow up offline about the price of some of the different types of RECs. And I suspect it's in a report that I still haven't read in full. So I'll do my own homework and we'll follow up if we have questions. Thank you so much. This has been great.
My pleasure.
So Matthew, I think I have a few questions, and mine tend to be less sophisticated than other people's questions. I always say, can you explain this to me like I'm in 5th grade? Because often that's what I feel like. And every time I go through this, I think I get clarity and then I get confusion. So let's say I'm going to give you an example and explain to me kind of how the mechanics works. Let's say I'm an energy producer. Let's say I set Mark's Great Solar or Mark's Great Wind company up in Maine, and I'm selling my energy to someone. Who am I selling it to? Who is paying the bill? Is it the PUC? Is it the transmission and distribution facility? Is it directly the consumer? Who sends me the money?
So there's a lot of ways to answer it. So I'm going to do my best to make it okay. And it's not a silly question because it's actually the crux of it. So the PUC doesn't send anybody a bill or pay anybody's bill. We're a quasi-judicial agency. We call balls and strikes. We implement what we're asked to implement in terms of policy. If you are you have Mark Solar, and you're connected to the grid, there are a couple of ways you can sell your power. One is you could go to your neighbor, you could go to a neighbor and say, hey, I have these solar panels. I want to sell power to you. And you could enter into a...
I'm sorry, Matthew, that's grid scale. We're not talking about NEB. We're talking about
we're not talking about
scale.
NEB. Yeah.
Okay.
Say your neighbor was happy, right?
Yeah.
So you could have a 5 megawatt facility or an 8 megawatt facility or 1 megawatt, whatever it is, and you go to Sappy as your neighbor, or Joe's factory,
or Maine Medical Center, or something
Maine
like
Medical
that.
Center, and you would enter, you could enter into a bilateral contract with them. And they would have an obligation of payment to you for whatever's there. And then you would do whatever's in the contract. So say, for example, you went to a medical center and they said, we need renewable energy. And you say, great, I'm going to sell you, I'm going to do a 20-year contract with you at, you know, whatever it is. And then you'll get your electricity from me. Then you're going to be, and assuming you're not like right next door to them, you'll put your energy onto the grid and they'll take energy from the grid. And then there will be some sort of a settlement process that gets the money back and forth.
So when Maine Medical Center pays their bill to CMP, CMP then has to do a transfer to me at the price I've agreed upon with Maine Medical Center?
Well, in the case that we're talking about, and this might be something that lends itself to, this might lend itself to a graphic that we would maybe provide at a later date. But if you're doing a bilateral contract with another sophisticated entity, then you would probably have, you might have your, I'm not really sure, actually. The simpler thing is, say you're a solar generator and you're selling into the market, there might be a competitive electric provider in between you, or a standard offer provider. In that case, you would be connected to the ISO New England, and ISO New England would monitor what you're putting into the marketplace. And if you don't have a direct contract with somebody else, what'll happen is you'll get the medical center. I might be tripping myself up here, but let me try this again.
Yeah. So if I'm Mark's Wind and I call myself, let's say Mark's Hot Air, okay?
Okay. Yeah.
And I'm selling wind power into the market.
Yeah.
And I'm just going to sell it to residential consumers, whoever wants to buy it. Who pays my bill? Who pays my fee every month or every week or whatever?
Right. So you've in the scenario you've described, you've cut out a middleman in there.
Yep.
So let me break it down. If you're Mark's Wind and you're just selling into the market, right? You will be interconnected. You'll put your power on the grid at whatever time. ISO New England will track it, assuming you're in ISO territory, will track it. And then each month you'll get a check for what you've put onto the grid.
From ISO New England?
From ISO New England.
Okay.
If you want your wind project to be exclusively used by residential consumers, then what you might consider doing would be to go to a competitive electric provider and say, I'm going to enter into a contract with you, and you're going to go out and find a bunch of residential providers. Or you could decide that you're going to have your own branch, but then you have to come register with the PUC to be a competitive electric provider. And then your customers will pay their bill through CMP, and then the money will find its way back to you through ISO New England.
So I guess I'm beginning to get a little bit of clarity. So if I'm just sending it directly, that's what I do. I get a check from ISO New England. If I'm selling it to, if I arrange with a supplier, and let's say it's Foster's Supply Company, they're supplying electricity, I then enter into a contract with Foster's Supply to sell my electricity to them. Foster's Supply gets reimbursed by CMP, and CMP and Foster's Supply sends the money on to me. Is that how it works?
I feel like I'm a little bit out of my depth on this. I think what I'd like to do is take this back as a question, and we could come up with a couple of diagrams for a couple of different scenarios and provide that to the committee. I don't want to misrepresent everything. And I think it was clearer in my mind than it might be as you're asking questions.
And I think maybe the way to do it, Matthew, is to set up a private tutorial. And you can have somebody kind of tutor me, because I don't get this the way other people do. And what I'm trying to get at is, am I selling the electric and I'm selling the rec separate? I am. So I sell the power ultimately to the residential person, but then to make more money, I can go out and sell the rec on another market. Okay. And I guess what I need work on is understanding how, if I'm a residential consumer and I want to guarantee I'm getting renewable energy, do I have to sign up with a supplier who will guarantee that they purchase RECs to guarantee that the electricity they're supplying is renewable?
So looking at this from the consumer perspective simplifies the number of variables. So I'm going to start there. So if I'm a consumer and I want to make sure I'm getting 42%, which is I think what we're at right now, of renewable energy, that's the renewable portfolio standard in Maine. I can just buy standard offer, and I'll know that 42% of my consumption has been covered by RECs, and I've gotten that much renewable. If I would like to augment the level of renewable energy that I buy so that I'm going all the way up to 100%, there's a couple of options. One, I could look through the list of CEPs and see which CEPs are offering a product that's 100% renewable, and then they are responsible for going out and procuring the balance. That's a voluntary market. Those RECs may be the RECs in that product could potentially come from someplace else.
Right. It could come from Hydro-Quebec. It could come from Alberta. It could come from New Mexico. Right. So to help me clarify, as I understand in your example, the PUC serves the role as the supplier for the standard rate offer. Is that correct?
Oh, no.
No?
No. The PUC procures. We have for the standard offer provider, we do a procurement. I apologize, I don't remember the frequencies off the top of my head, but we undergo a procurement. It's an RFP, and then we get a number of different national energy suppliers that bid, national and local, and there's usually several, and then there's a team that evaluates the bids to ensure what the best deal is for Maine ratepayers, and the PUC through the RFP process harnesses the buying power of 1.2 million people in the state of Maine rather than leaving individuals to go compete and negotiate with competitive electric providers.
Okay. And you're essentially developing an offer for the people who are not purchasing directly from some specialized supplier.
Correct. The standard offer is the default service, which is offered to Maine ratepayers.
Okay. So now, and I apologize for even making this muddier, then how does the PUC guarantee that X percentage, 42% of the electricity consumed in Maine is renewable?
We have a reporting requirement to all providers for a number of things, not just RPS, also other requirements of being a licensed provider in the state of Maine. And that reporting requirement ensures that they send us reports, and then my colleagues and I go through those reports, and we see and verify that they've actually met the portfolio requirement and the other things. They have to report to us any consumer issues and stuff like that.
So in other words, anybody who's listed on a supplier on a IOU bill or a COU bill has to report to you, and you put those all together and guarantee that we're at 42%.
We do not regulate the generators, so they report to us, and we check based on their affirmation. They sign an affirmation when they report to us. So we compare to make sure that they're telling us, we look at what they're telling us.
Right, but I guess I'm confusing between a generator and a supplier. Are they the same thing?
No, the generator doesn't generally talk directly to like a residential household. Like in general, the generator doesn't. The world has changed a lot, so I can't really answer that. Like in the world where we have community solar, then you have the people who are putting up the generation talking directly to the people who are consuming some generation, even though but it's all being intermediated through the grid. So that's why you're not wrong to be confused, because it is confusing. But there's a lot of nuance. So I'm hesitant to give sort of blanket yeses.
But I guess I'm trying to get at it, and so when you take my kind of convoluted questions back to your people, I'm trying to determine who is the RPS requirement on. Is it
The
on the
RPS
supplier?
requirement is on the supply, is on the competitive energy provider. The
That's
reason
the
that we,
supplier.
right, the standard, yeah, the supplier to the retail, whoever it is that's interacting with the consumer that's doing the
Okay.
collecting of the money, that's where that obligation rests. And that obligation rests there because that is the entity which is best positioned to be able to ensure that there's renewable supplies. Because
Okay.
remember, the T&D utility is just a set of wires that the power is going through.
Correct, correct. So my last question, I promise it's my last at this point, is
I'm here.
you aggregate all the suppliers together to kind of look at and make sure we're at 42% of the electricity being supplied in Maine meets the renewable standard. And I assume some suppliers can go out and buy RECs and stuff to comply with that. So is there a possibility that the non-standard offer suppliers are providing a higher amount of renewable, and therefore in our renewable supply, in our standard offer suppliers, the renewable is less?
I just want to repeat your question to make sure I understood it. If we were looking at the supply in the entire state of Maine, is it possible that a CEP is over providing and the RPS, the standard offer provider, is under providing?
Yes.
I suppose anything's possible. I don't think it would be likely because we actually check compliance at an individual level.
Oh, you do? Every individual supplier has to be at 42%.
And then they're allowed under commission rules, say, for example, they over purchased RECs this year, they're allowed to bank them for next year.
Okay. Okay. I think I understand. I was getting at the point where, let's say 50% of the people in Maine are buying through the standard offer and 50% are not. And those people not buying through the standard offer are purchasing 80% renewable. Does that allow the renewable percentage on the standard offer suppliers to be lower? And you're telling me no.
Correct.
Okay, great. So thank you. That's a little bit of clarity for me. And I'm sure when you come up with a tutor for me, I'll get a little bit more clarity. Representative Cuddy.
Thank you very much, Senator, and thank you for that entire discussion. And all I want to say is when the tutoring program comes about, please let me know. I would like to also sit in on that.
Great. Thank you, Representative. Representative Barry.
Well, I really appreciate this discussion today, and I think it was intended. The good news and the bad news is I think this was intended as the tutoring session. I guess it was a success. I'm going to take that as a success because Mr. Rolnick, you have helped us to come to a deeper level of understanding as a committee, and I think what I'm hearing is that we want more of this. So I'm really pleased with the discussion, and I also think that it's possible that some of the confusion around terminology is due to the way that we have used multiple terms in statute and in practice. Your exchange with Senator Lawrence used the word supplier. It also used the word provider. And we have, I think this is our fault. In statute, we use, I think 3 different terms for the same thing. There's competitive energy provider, competitive energy supplier, competitive service provider also. And I'm flagging this for our analyst. I'd like to see if we can't clean that up and just be consistent. Supply seems to me to be the word that's typically used in the trade. It's not a service so much as a supply, and that may be where we want to go with this. But I would like to see greater consistency in our terminology, and it's natural to distinguish supply from delivery, right? Which is what the utilities do. So perhaps the discussion, Mr. Rolnick, can even help us to be more clear in statute. And I just want and there was one other thing I wanted to ask you about, darn it. And I'm going to have to get back to you because that really that really was what stuck in my mind most just now. I think this was very helpful, and once again, thank you. The committee may have an opportunity to continue this discussion. I certainly am open to spending more time on it myself as a committee, because we do have a number of bills and reports. Oh, I remember, that was the other thing. So this report and other reports that have been submitted to this committee are available on the OPLA website, and the committee doesn't have a website of its own other than what is listed under OPLA. So Senator Lawrence, with your permission, I'd just like to show people where these reports are before we leave today.
Sure.
And I can do it right now or wait until
Well, I
Representative
see
Cuddy.
Representative Cuddy has his hand up. Do you still have a question, Representative Cuddy?
No, I apologize.
Okay, okay. And before we go on to Representative Berry showing us where that's located, which I appreciate, I want to thank you, Matthew, because that was very helpful to me. The trouble is you need to recognize when you present these things to a tutorial to this committee, it's like a little bit like a one-room schoolhouse. There are those people who are operating at the 10th and 11th grade level, like Representative Foster, Representative Berry, Representative Grohowski, and there are those that, like me, who are operating at a kindergarten level. So it's difficult to teach to all of us at once.
You're most welcome. I actually was adjunct faculty at City University for a while in economics, and I'm used to having a classroom with broad understandings, and I'm happy to try as many different ways as possible. We all learn differently.
Okay, Representative Berry, you had something you wanted to show us.
That's great. And Senator Lawrence, you're much too modest. It's always the smartest people that ask the stupidest questions, because they're trying to get it to get everyone on the same page. We know what you're up to. Darn it, where did I go with that? Okay, here we go. And as every good teacher knows, Mr. Rolnick, there is no stupid question, right? So the legislature.maine.gov, we're all familiar with that. If you click on OPLA, which is, I'll actually go one step back. So you go to legislature.maine.gov. You go to legislative offices at the top and look for OPLA. That, of course, is the Office of Policy and Legal Analysis, where our wonderful committee analysts are housed. And within the Office of Policy and Legal Analysis, there are many resources and legislative study reports, but over on the left, you see committee materials as one of the bullets, one of the links. And clicking from OPLA onto committee materials, you get a drop down of all of the committee, of the joint standing committees, and we are, of course, EUT. So click on that, and here we have our interim committee meeting information on those. And under committee materials, all of the materials as listed by LD, which is very helpful, and those include the analyses, which are not listed on the online when you look up a bill in the typical way. And under reports and presentations, here's where we see the report on procurement, which was just presented briefly to us today, as well as other reports that we have recently received in the second session. So all those at the top are the reports that have been presented to us thus far. And we'll continue to hear other reports presented over the next few weeks. So this is just a resource to go back to them, and they'll be posted as we continue to hear them. And I'm sure that I messed something up, so maybe our committee analyst wants to chime in and let me know what I goofed.
I was going to ask Lindsay to join us again as we wrap up, and we can beam Mr. Rolnick back across, if that's okay, Jason.
And I just want to say, Representative Berry, you did not mess anything up, but there is perhaps a slightly easier way to get there. So if you'd like, I can share my screen and just show folks how to get to the reports page.
Please do.
Excellent. Bear with me one moment. And can you see my screen?
Yes, I can.
Excellent. So this is at the legislature's main page. If you go up to committees and to legislative committees,
Oh, yes.
and so then you'll see choose committee, EUT. And so this is where you can see, the schedule also. And then this brings you to the committee materials. And as Representative Barry showed, this is where you get there. So you've got the committee meeting materials by LD, but then also reports.
That is shorter, much better.
So now there's no excuse for any of us because we now know 2 ways to get to the same information. Okay. Lindsay, is there anything we need to do to wrap up today?
No, I believe we are done for the day, and the schedule for next week hopefully will be coming out a little bit later.
Okay, great. Any questions from committee members before we say goodbye? I don't see any. Great. So everybody have a good rest of the day, and we'll see you next week. Take care.
Bye, everybody.